Welcome, everyone, this is your friend, here with another exciting fanfiction. Today, we're diving into the story of, what if Tony didn't want to be saved? If you enjoy this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fanfiction content just like this. Now, let's get started with the fanfic. After the Battle of Manhattan, and before Anthony Edward Stark's big revelation to himself, he'd assumed that the Avengers would be using the tower, no matter what it was called, as a base of operations. As such, and being the genius that he is, he'd thought ahead to the inevitable field injuries that the motley crew were likely to bring home. And considering they all had a pretty freaking huge aversion to Shield Medical, set up the best medical wing that Stark money could buy within the communal floors. He'd thought to himself that it'd be easier in the long run for the Avengers to get themselves patched up, mostly by Banner if he hadn't gone Hulk, in the safety of their own home than Shield Medical, from whence there was no escape. Of course he'd forgotten that he wasn't an Avenger. He was just a consultant. Come to find out, the Avengers really didn't want anything to do with him at all. It even took him 7 damn long months to realize that Fury had played him, and played him well. Fury'd used a private channel to let him know that a nuke was coming, because he knew what Stark would do. The only thing he could do to save his team, not his team, just a consultant, and his city. Why? Because you have a building? He hadn't been surprised when the nightmares started. Only this time, instead of replaying Afghanistan and the Expo disaster over and over in his dreams, so many people dead because of him, he replays the nuke and the wormhole. Some nights he doesn't make it back and he just floats forever among the Chitauri debris. Some nights he flies right back down to see that there'd been no change, and they're still losing and that was the wrong call. Some nights the Widow didn't listen and closed the portal too early and he only has up and up and up to take the nuke. He doesn't survive and neither does Manhattan after the Chitauri forces reopen the portal and there's no more superhero resistance. The world soon follows. The worst nights are the nights where he never warns Widow of the incoming nuke. He just lets it hit as he hauls ass in the opposite direction. Just like Rogers said he would. The world doesn't survive Loki. Tony usually wakes up when he puts the barrel of the gun in his mouth. Usually. He quit drinking. Drinking himself into oblivion only worked if he didn't dream. He always dreamed. When Happy was hurt and he challenged an international terrorist live on television, and subsequently lost everything that was his Malibu life, he'd expected to hear from S.H.I.E.L.D. if nothing else than for them to tell him what an idiot he was being, but there was nothing. No Coulson, oh, wait, idiot and dead. No Avengers, and no S.H.I.E.L.D. checking in to see if their technical consultant might need a hand with the guy responsible for blowing up half the goddamned world. He hoped they felt about 2 inches high when the dig nabbed the damn president. Without Rhodey he probably wouldn't have been able to save Pepper and as it were, she was injected with extremis. Tony nearly died himself. Rhodey bailed on him to save the POTUS. But Pepper came to his rescue. How embarrassing is that? He tried, damn it. He tried so damn hard to fix her extremis problem himself, but just knowing that she was in the mess because of him and knowing there was no Coulson coming to save her this time. How pathetic of a man was he? Coulson always saving his girl. He broke down and tracked down one Dr. Robert Bruce Banner. It only takes him a few measly days what it's been taking Tony weeks of non-stop panic-inducing nightmare-riddled blur. After all, Dr. Banner had been a biochemist before his little accident, and Pepper is stabilized and safe. Tony tries so hard to laugh and joke and fake it until he makes it. But in the end he just makes Bruce uncomfortable. Bruce knows something is wrong, but not exactly what. Cue Anthony Edward Stark's second big revelation following what the press has now dubbed the Battle of New York and the Mandarin Marauder. The world needs Iron Man. The Avengers do not. Iron Man yes, Tony Stark, not recommended. Besides, Rhodey still has the Iron Patriot. What the fuck ever, it is, was, and will always be the war machine buddy. And he can be their air support if Thor is off-world. That's what the suit was built for in the first place. Back when Tony was dying of palladium poisoning, he needed the suit and Yinsen's legacy to live on. Within the week of Pepper getting the all-clear from Dr. Banner, because the soft squishy side of the Hulk is no longer comfortable with Stark and first names, Tony has the arc reactor removed, against all medical advice, and a hard plastics prosthesis fitted over the gaping hole left from where sternum, rib, muscle, and various other tissues had to be removed to fit the thing inside. The prognosis is, however, not so good, and this he keeps from Pepper. There is nothing to be done for his diminished lung capacity, as the damn things have healed that way, and his heart is shot to shit from taking too many close-up encounters with the shrapnel. The discreet doctors. Best in the world, Pep, I promise. Recommend heart, liver, and a double lung transplant. He's 43, he's killed probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions, with his company's weapons and carelessness, merchant of death. Anyone. And who knows how many Chitauri he can add to his body count. The two Spicosians talk about ledgers and the red that stains them and trying to make amends. Can you make amends for oceans, galaxies, universes of red? He turns down the lists. He fires all of the doctors, tells Pepper he loves her, and whatever will be, will be. He was already feeling the effects of his body slowly giving up the proverbial ghost and saying, "Fuck you," one last time when he heard Hammer Time was back and in London of all places. But then, that's where his lady love Jane, and interns Darcy and what's-his-face and Bag and what the fuck did Loki even do Selvig, is, and his hops in his newest prototype to jet over to say hello. He wants to get Fury's old boy band back together, and this seems the perfect reason. But every member of the team is turning him down, politely. What the fuck? When he finally lands in London, he has a deep rattling cough that just aches all the way down to his very marrow. But he still makes his way to where Jane and crew and crashing with Point Break. Through a great bay window he sees the entire Avengers team assembled, along with one Colonel James Rhodes. Iron Man, yes. Tony Stark, not recommended. Oh yes. How could he have forgotten that? Looked like his plan was coming to fruition after all. Didn't mean it didn't hurt like a bitch though. With his health continuing to decline, Tony again tries to get the Avengers and Rhodey and company to move into the tower. Whatever they want to call it is fine with him. He wants them to have the best technology that money can have, the best healthcare at their fingertips, and most of all, the best security. When he realizes he might be the reason they keep turning it down, he offers to move himself out, which pisses Pepper off to no end, but they decline again. The Avengers are running missions out of S.H.I.E.L.D. without him, with Rhodey, damn it. And Tony just wants to see the people he helped, because fuck you, he helped save the world with one more time. He attempts to call Dr. Banner to let him know about his deteriorating condition, but the call is short, clipped, and Tony's health is never mentioned. Banner doesn't have time for Tony's games. He's busy with the Avengers, and he never hears the breath catch in the back of Tony's throat or the broken rattle as it leaves his lungs. He's already hung up the line. Too late, the Avengers finally make their way to the tower after it is revealed that HYDRA had been hiding within S.H.I.E.L.D. all along, and in order to take it down, S.H.I.E.L.D. has fallen. They encounter a grieving Pepper Potts, who violently slaps a still healing Steve Rogers, asks to speak with the consultant. The Avengers warily retreat to their respective floors upon seeing the angry orange flushing of the extremis just below her skin. Jarvis directs them. Bunking James, Bucky, Barnes and Sam Wilson with Steve Rogers. In the few days it takes the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. Philip J. Coulson, not so dead after all, to show up. They'll learn the terrible irrevocable truth. Anthony Edward Stark was dying fast of a broken heart, diminished lung capacity, and his heart will probably go long before his liver, they had said when they removed the arc. The under the weather turning into pneumonia, turning into congestive heart failure before anyone could catch it. Tony caught it, but didn't want to be an even bigger burden than he felt he already was. Well, he had tried to make the call, but was turned away. He had days, maybe only hours left to live. Previously in Chapter 1. A better explanation of dire events. Anthony Edward Stark was dying fast of a broken heart, diminished lung capacity, and his heart will probably go long before his liver, they had said when they removed the arc. The under the weather turning into pneumonia, turning into congestive heart failure before anyone could catch it. Tony caught it, but didn't want to be an even bigger burden than he felt he already was. Well, he had tried to make the call, but was turned away. He had days, maybe only hours left to live. By the time the Avengers make their way to the tower, Tony spends most of his time resting fitfully hooked to so many monitors. It's hard to see the Man of Iron. He's gotten too weak to remove the oxygen mask that irritates him so, yet he does not complain. He doesn't have the air or strength to. He never thought that he'd be using his state-of-the-art medical facilities for Avengers injuries, damn it. to see him through the final stages of the end of his life. Pepper sits with him, constantly stroking his hair and reading to him. Gestures of comfort that probably mean more to her. He promised her he'd be okay. And here he is breaking another promise. He tried to hide his failing health from her, because that worked so well with the palladium poisoning. But knowing that this is the real end, just makes it that much harder on them both. Tony doesn't know that Pepper sent Rhodey to the Avengers because she saw his health declining and knew, as sure as she knew her first name was Virginia, that if the Avengers were called out, Tony would go if they had no air support, health be damned. She, of course, didn't know how bad it was. She was highly paranoid after the palladium poisoning, or how bad it was going to get, but she thought that a few days of rest and relaxation with him having to worry about the rest of the world would soothe him. It also gives Rhodey the chance to rip each and every Avenger a new asshole for the way they treat or have treated Tony in the past. They stop refusing the tower because it represents a buy-in to the Avengers and start refusing it because they realize just how unworthy of Tony Stark they truly are. When S.H.I.E.L.D. falls and no one hears a peep from Stark, Potts, or Jarvis, it's Rhodey in a near panic that sends them all to the tower. With how fast his health declined, and everything happening on the news, Pepper has had no chance to tell Rhodey that Tony is dying. That there is no last-minute Hail Mary miracle. No transplants, no cure, just his body shutting down from an ill-advised surgery related to the injuries he suffered in Afghanistan nearly a decade ago. The assembled Avengers and their tag-alongs are completely and totally devastated by the impending loss of one of the greatest men the world will ever know. Pepper has been with Tony for a long time, and she hasn't tried to kill him yet, but Rhodey has been with him since MIT. Since before Jarvis, one of the first nights in the tower after the fall of S.H.I.E.L.D. the Avengers are picking at a meal no one feels like eating when he blurts out to Jarvis, "Extremis. Colonel Rhodes? Jarvis, can we use the stabilized Extremis strand that Pepper is carrying to heal the damaged organs in Tony's body?" Rhodes clarified. Before Jarvis could answer, Banner did. "No, it's too dangerous. In his weakened state, he'd likely go Nova and take out an entire Manhattan City block. Then we put him in the Hulk room first. We don't just sit around here and let him die," Rhodes shot back. "Mayhaps I could take him to the healers of Asgard? They are well versed in all manner of disease and injury, and such a noble warrior such as the Man of Iron would be welcomed there," Thor interjected diplomatically, trying to keep the peace. Only to be corrected by Barton. "Thor, buddy, Tony would never survive the trip. Can you get one of your healers down here? Like you did for me when Loki fucked over my head?" Banner finally spoke up again after finally getting back under control. How could Rhodes just assume they would let Tony die? Jarvis? Tony uses 3D printing to fabricate the parts he needs for his suits and inventions, doesn't he? "Yes, Dr. Banner. Sir showed you this when you were last here. Do we have the technology available to us to 3D print the organs that are shutting down? In case the healers can't, or won't help." "Fuck that, Jarvis, find me a list of all suitable candidates that Tony could receive the organs from." "Sorry Dr. Banner, we don't have time to grow new ones," Natasha finally spoke up. Steve, who wouldn't condone the death of another person even if it was to save Tony, finally said something. "What about my blood? The serum, could it be transferred to him? Help him heal himself?" This kicked off a firestorm of a debate. They could save him. They would save him, but they had to act quickly. His condition was almost too far gone, and they didn't even know which way they were going to save him. Previously in Chapter 2, Possibilities and Hope. This kicked off a firestorm of a debate. They could save him, they would save him, but they had to act quickly. His condition was almost too far gone, and they didn't even know which way they were going to save him. Pepper Potts was lying in the bed next to Tony Stark as they watched the Avengers in the communal kitchen bicker and argue over just how they were going to save the man that meant so much to so many. Pepper felt her heart soar. She wouldn't lose him after all. He would live. He'd probably go back to being Iron Man and scaring the crap out of her. But she wouldn't have to live the rest of her life without him and wonder if sending Rhodey to the Avengers in his stead is what sent him on this downward spiral. She didn't realize she had tears sneaking down her cheeks until a weak, shaking hand laden with IVs gently thumbed one off. "Pep, I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, Tony. Everything is going to be okay now. We're going to figure this out, and you're going to be saved." Pepper's voice was warbly, shaking nearly as bad as Tony's hand. "Pep," he started, rasping. "I am so sorry. I'm tired. I tried not to waste it. But I'm tired." His breath was starting to come in little gasps, so she reached over and turned his oxygen up, again, this time to its highest setting. As much as she couldn't bear to hear him struggling to breathe, she had to know what the hell he was talking about. Tony, I don't understand." Pep, gasping, even with his oxygen at its highest settings, she had a really bad feeling about what was going to happen next. "Virginia, baby, I don't want to be saved." Pepper gasped. She just couldn't comprehend that this man who had been through so much would give up now. Not when they were so close to saving him. "Anthony Edward Stark. You listen to me. You're a good man. You're a hero. You deserve to live a long and happy life. Even if you don't get back out there in the suit. Do you understand me?" she demanded. Tony had a single tear tracking down one cheek, still gasping for breath when he replied, "I love you, Pep. But I'm not a good man. Just a fraud. I tried to be good, for you. Everything I did after Afghanistan was for you. Baby, I'm tired," he trailed off. Before she could respond, a loud commotion sounded from the communal living room. Squeezing his hand, she checked the cameras, only to see a dead man standing with a group of people she's never seen before, glaring at the Avengers. Phil had saved her so many times in the past. Maybe he could save her one last time, because there would be no Pepper Potts without a Tony Stark. Giving his hand one last squeeze, she went to fetch the man that the love of her life had dubbed Agent. Phil Coulson. All commotion in the communal room stopped when Pepper stepped in to grab the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. "You need to come with me now. Tony doesn't have much time left." Director Coulson, who had been unaware of Stark's condition, stared blankly at the tear-stained face at one of the most composed women he'd ever met. "I'm sorry, what do you mean Stark doesn't have much time left? Was he injured in the HYDRA reveal?" A collective shudder went through the room as Pepper's skin flashed a vivid fiery orange before she could respond. "No, Mr. Stark has not been a part of the Avengers team since the Battle of Manhattan. He had no part in the HYDRA reveal. He is dying from congestive heart failure even though each of the members of the Avengers have come up with a solution to save him. He has informed me. He does not wish to be saved." The room erupted into chaos. Except for Colonel Rhodes, who collapsed into the nearest chair. "Is he still of sound mind and judgment, Pepper?" he whispered. She nodded in assent, not trusting her voice to remain steady. She needed Coulson to get to Tony now. "What does that have to do with anything? We have the means to save him. We will damn well do so," Barton snapped. Banner eased himself down next to Rhodes, doing him damnedest to breathe the green away. "If we don't have permission from the patient, we can't." All eyes snapped to him. He glanced at Rhodes and Potts and knew the terrible truth. "He's asked you to let him die, hasn't he? It is his body. His mind. His decision. Pepper is through talking with these so-called heroes." She grabbed Phil by the arm and began dragging him by the arm to the med bay. "Pepper. I'm sorry, Miss Potts, if you don't mind, I'd like to speak to Mr. Stark alone. It may be his decision now, but I have an idea." Pepper looked at him with watery eyes. "What kind of idea?" "We might not have any choice but to let him die." A soft sob escaped from the distraught CEO. "But as you well know, I myself was killed in the attack on the helicarrier. He doesn't have to stay dead." The director of S.H.I.E.L.D. trailed off. Pepper's eyes snapped to his and she pierced him to his very soul with her "don't fuck with the redhead" expression. "And what's the price of this miracle you're offering? Does it matter? No, it does not. You fuck us over, I will burn you, your team, and your whole entire world to the ground. Do you understand me, Coulson?" Crystal. Previously in Chapter 3. He's so tired but she's on fire. Pepper's eyes snapped to his and she pierced him to his very soul with her "don't fuck with the redhead" expression. "And what's the price of this miracle you're offering? Does it matter? No, it does not. You fuck us over, I will burn you, your team, and your whole entire world to the ground. Do you understand me, Coulson?" Crystal. "Mr. Stark, I hear that your health has taken a dramatic and drastic turn for the worse." Coulson announced his presence in the room where one Anthony Edward Stark lay dying. He thought he'd been prepared for the scene that greeted him. But the sight of one of the greatest men in the world so still in a hospital bed gasping for breath surrounded by so many machines, shook even his resolve. Phil, a weak whisper greeted him. In all the years knowing Tony Stark, the man had never once called him by his first name. It had always been Coulson, Agent, or their personal favorite, Agent. I knew it was coming soon. Just didn't think it would be you to collect me, he gasped out. Stark, I'm afraid I don't understand. Coulson, you're dead. I'm dying. Cut the shit. You're here to take me, aren't you? How the hell was he supposed to respond to that? Tony must be delirious. But then, he thought, like all of the Avengers, he thought Coulson was dead. Hell, Coulson had been dead. Until Fury had reignited the TAH project and brought him back. Sorry to disappoint you, Mr. Stark. You and I are very much alive. I'm here to offer you a proposition. Get you back into fighting form, and get back at your so-called teammates while we're at it. Of all the people I thought would come to collect me, you were on my list, but you weren't at the top, Coulson. I'm not looking for deals. I'm ready to go. I'm tired. So tired, Tony rasped. If he were honest with himself, he'd been hoping to see a certain someone else. Coulson was good, don't get him wrong, but he just wanted to know if he'd made him proud. Then perhaps I will collect, after you are dead, Mr. Stark. After all, where will the Avengers be without their technical consultant? Their weapons designers. I've seen everything you've done to try to make this team work after the Battle of Manhattan, only to be turned away time and time again. Without you, there is no Avengers, Mr. Stark. Can you let go knowing that? Coulson was not above using Stark's heart against him. Director Coulson, I do believe that Sir is too far gone to be saved. Please refrain from making his last moments any more difficult. My apologies, Jarvis. I am trying to save Mr. Stark. Even if he loses this fight, we still have time to win the war, so to speak. Coulson noticed that Stark's eyes were beginning to glass over and his was no longer focusing solely on him. Stark, listen to me. I need to know why you think you don't deserve to be saved? What he answered with chilled Coulson to his bones. Iron Man, yes. Tony Stark, not recommended. Oh, my God. This was his entire fault. Not S.H.I.E.L.D., not the Avengers, his. That stupid personality profile he and Romanoff compiled when Stark was dying of palladium poisoning was the cause of Tony's decline. He'd seen Stark pouring his heart and soul into the Avengers initiative. He'd known Romanoff had read him wrong and signed off on the report because he'd thought that he would be saving his life, not ending it. He'd known, damn it, that when push came to shove, it would be Stark laying down on the wire and going out in the blaze of fire that Iron Man had been born in. He'd told Fury that when he'd been ordered to activate Stark, that if the excrement was about to hit the ventilator, he would not be the one responsible for telling Potts about Stark's demise. That they'd be sending the man to his death. Sure enough, when the World Safety Council, bunch of HYDRA-controlled dicks, sent the nuke, it was Tony Stark laying everything down on the line and taking it through the wormhole. They'd nearly lost him. Would have lost the world without his quick thinking and willingness to make what he thought was a one-way trip. He'd heard that he'd tried to call Pepper mid-nuke into spaceflight, and that was all Coulson needed to know about what Stark, though his odds were of returning. Widow closed the portal at the last possible moment and he just barely made it through then. If not for Hulk catching him and slowing down his fall, they still would have lost him. He saved the goddamned world and then the Avengers just sort of forgot about him because he'd been trying to save his life. Stark, you listen to me. The only reason you were not considered for the Avengers initiative was that I knew we'd lose you. I knew Widow has read you wrong and the personality profile was a bunch of bullshit. But I knew personally with your history, you'd go out in a blaze of glory either to save the world, or just one of your teammates, or a civilian. You'd do anything to stop the loss of life. Even at the cost of your own. Phil felt Stark's eyes focus on him one last time. He could tell by the monitors that they didn't have much time left. Pretty sentiment. We're still out of time though. Tony's eyes were losing focus again, drifting over Coulson's shoulder. His O2 stats were too low for his oxygen being on high and his pulse was getting slower and slower. Coulson reached forward and took his hand knowing that this was it. Hating it. Knowing that it was his fault, but that this was it. If you had a chance to come back, don the suit and get back out there with your team, would you take it, Stark? Coulson was trying to get Stark to hang on just a little bit longer. He really didn't want to do what he was going to do this without his permission. But they really needed him in the Avengers initiative. But Stark was quickly becoming unresponsive. He would though, unless he responded, no, before he passed in the next couple of minutes. God help him, Coulson would. Yinsen. The whisper was so weak he barely heard it. Who or what was a Yinsen? Tony's eyes was focused over his shoulders, but there was no one there when Coulson turned. Tired Yinsen. Jarvis. Who or what is Yinsen? Yinsen was a fellow captive with Sir in Afghanistan. He died during the escape. Sir never recovered from his death or spoke of it to anyone but myself. If he is seeing him now, then I am afraid the time has come. So, sorry Yinsen, can I come home now? The monitors besides the bed began to blast warnings and trill alarms. He was fading and fading fast. One final whisper of, Yinsen? Did I waste it? And he was gone. Anthony Edward Stark died on a sunny Sunday afternoon surrounded by the best medical equipment his money could buy, a man back from the dead, a ghost that he'd spent the last decade trying to make proud. He'd poured his mind, heart, and soul into an initiative only to have it stomped on, shredded, chewed up, and spat back at him like it was nothing at all. He was 43. This all could have been avoided if only the damn Avengers had kept in the fold. Could Coulson truly bring him back? Knowing how he'd suffered, how he could suffer again. One thing was certain. If he did bring him back, things were going to change, drastically. And not just because he was the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. but because he was Tony Stark's friend goddammit, and he'd let him down. Jarvis, make the announcement please. Of course Director Coulson. Coulson could hear the pain and anguish in the AI's voice. Attention Avengers Tower. At approximately 4:12 p.m. Sunday, February 15, 2015. Anthony Edward Stark has passed away due to complications relating to the surgical removal of the arc reactor. Coulson and Jarvis both could hear Pepper's wailing cries from wherever she was in the tower. Previously in Chapter 4. This is not the end, of course Director Coulson. Coulson could hear the pain and anguish in the AI's voice. Attention Avengers Tower. At approximately 4:12 p.m. Sunday, February 15, 2015. Anthony Edward Stark has passed away due to complications relating to the surgical removal of the arc reactor. Coulson and Jarvis both could hear Pepper's wailing cries from wherever she was in the tower. Attention Avengers Tower. At approximately 4:12 p.m. Sunday, February 15, 2015. Anthony Edward Stark has passed away due to complications relating to the surgical removal of the arc reactor. Jarvis' announcement stopped all bickering and arguing between the Avengers and the team the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. had brought with him. There was a collective inhale of air, Banner lurching to his feet, green, but not hulking out green. Rogers collapsing against a wall. Rhodes collapsing in a heap to the floor. Widow and Hawk falling against one another in disbelief. Thor taking a knee in grief, and Pepper, poor Pepper Potts just started wailing. Lying, he's lying. They said Phil was dead and he's here now. This is another trick to get us to work together. He's lying, Banner yelled. His voice too deep and guttural. They were about to have a very big, very green problem on their hands. Phil Coulson appeared in the doorway. His eyes were rimmed in red, his back straight as steel, but his hands betrayed a tremor. Dr. Banner, I understand you are the Avengers' private physician? His body is this way. Coulson stood aside the doorframe and lifted a hand to point the way. His voice barely a whisper and so hard to hear over Pepper wailing, but now in Rhodes' arms. Jarvis called it, the monitors are flat-lined, but if you need to see for yourself how you all have failed him, be my guest. Simmons prep a dendrotoxin sedative for Potts. Even stabilized by Stark and Banner. This could prove to be the igniting point for the extremists. Rhodes looked up at that. He was aware that Pepper was flashing the violent fiery orange. He could feel the heat scorching his own skin. But did they really think sedating her was going to fix this? The other Avengers were too shocked and ashamed to reply to this charge. They knew they'd failed him. And Simmons prepped the other as well. Sir, just do it, Simmons. One by one the Avengers paid their last respects to the once great man of iron and returned to the communal living room where Pepper laid near Catatonia in Rhodes' lap. Sam and Bucky didn't feel the need to go. They hadn't known the man, the fact that Bucky as the Winter Soldier had killed his parents notwithstanding. So they made coffee and tea and tried to provide support for those that were now grieving. The new S.H.I.E.L.D. team hadn't known Stark either, just of him. But they knew that the world had lost a great man. Once the Avengers had reassembled back into the communal living room like lost little puppies, Coulson's team moved in to deal with the body. Pepper and Rhodey opted not to see him one last time. Pepper hated the fact that she hadn't been with him when he passed. Coulson was so very, very grateful for it. Can someone, anyone, please explain to just what the fuck happened here? And no, I'm not talking about the congestive heart failure from the arc removal. I'm talking about him not being on the goddamned Avengers since the Battle of Manhattan. Coulson shouted at the room. A collective flinch went around, except for Pepper, too far gone on the sedative. No one bothered to look up to meet the irate director's eyes. And no one bothered to try to explain themselves. Except for one person. I can't tell you why they abandoned him. I can only speak for myself when I say I've been riding jockey on the Iron Patriot suit since the Mandarin incident because he slid a glance to Pepper, still in his lap unresponsive. We knew his health was declining. We didn't know how bad it was. That was something he always played close to the vest. You remember the palladium reactor thing? We were hoping that if he wasn't worrying about the world he'd rest. Colonel James Rhodes wrapped his arms tighter around the woman in his lap. Knowing he didn't have to explain their actions, but needing to anyway. Wondering just how much they had played a role in his best friend's death. God, how could he really be gone, anyway? We didn't abandon him, Rogers spoke up gruffly. We were told time and time again to leave him be. That he wanted nothing to do with the Avengers. He was too busy running his company. That he wasn't really a team type of player. He finally looked up to meet Coulson's eyes, still red-rimmed with their shared grief. I was ordered not to bother him, sir. We needed him and we couldn't have him. Was told to make do with Colonel Rhodes. This got everyone's attention. Steve Rogers had reached out to Anthony Stark. Or had tried and been rebuked. By whom and why? You're going to have to explain that to me, Rogers. Coulson's body may have been stoic, but his voice was trembling in rage. Who told you to make do with Rhodes? I told Fury we needed air support. He said Stark wasn't on board with it. It wasn't until we nearly lost Widow and Hawkeye after the AIM raid in Dublin that Colonel Rhodes joined us. He looked over at the man in question still holding pepper pots in his lap. No offense, Colonel, but we really needed Stark. He was on the team from the very beginning, you weren't. And I made it even worse because I knew his health was going downhill, so I made sure you'd leave him be. Rhodey was shaking. This really was his fault, and gently rocking Pepper side to side. Whether for her comfort or his own, well, no one was judging. Widow, Hawk. Report. Coulson barked at the once great strike team Delta. Didn't they know that Stark had built most of their weapons and gear? That he'd been their emergency extraction in Budapest? Because Stark had owed Coulson a favor and Coulson couldn't lose them. The suit wasn't exactly fucking subtle. Sidwell ordered no contact from S.H.I.E.L.D. to Stark Industries or Stark himself. No reason given. It was implied that Stark couldn't be trusted after hacking the helicarrier mainframe. Romanoff finally spoke up after a long look exchanged with her partner. Sidwell, the same man that ended up being the highest-ranking HYDRA mole in S.H.I.E.L.D. ordered you not to make contact and you obeyed? The fuck? Natasha? Coulson couldn't believe it. Yeah. Natasha had blown the personality profile of Stark. But that was because he was the consummate showman and only showing her what she expected to see. But how the fuck could she have trusted Sidwell and abandoned Stark? Back off, Coulson. We all know we fucked up. We can't change the fact that he's dead. We all know my head was a million ways wedged after Loki in Manhattan. Thor had a healer come down and fix me. Tony Stark took a motherfucking nuclear warhead into a portal to another dimension thinking it was a one-way trip and came back. He'd known he was gonna die and then suddenly he didn't. I saw the reports afterwards. Flashbacks, nightmares, panic attacks. We didn't make contact because we didn't want to fucking trigger him. Barton had had enough. He hadn't known Stark expect for an importune trip to shawarma. But he knew what it was like to survive torture. Thinking you were going to die, but never quite making it there. And the unexpected triggers that could hit you out of the blue and send you back into that headspace. My apologies, sirs and misses. I feel it very prudent to remind Dr. Banner of the Hulk out room on floor 92 at this time. Everyone looked up at Jarvis' announcement and then at Banner, who was an alarming shade of green and struggling to breathe normally. I knew something was wrong after the Mandarin. I never thought that I had to go. Banner was up and moving to the elevator. To the Hulk out room especially designed for the other guy before him. And no one would have with the Hulk minutes, maybe seconds from showing up to express his grief over losing the Tin Man. Thor was maybe the quietest of all. He'd lost a great shield brother today. So soon after losing Loki, who he'd had millennia with, he didn't understand how someone could conceivably be gone after only 43 Midgardian years. Brother Anthony was the mightiest of warrior to survive so long an injury grave enough to end him. Fighting his enemies and Midgards should not have been his priority. Had I known him ill sooner, mayhaps there would have been time for Asgard's healers to save him. Mayhaps not. We will rejoice the memories he has left for us and mourn his passing. May he find his peace among the halls of Valhalla. The room fell into an uneasy silence after Thor's speech. Sam Wilson and James Barnes were in the living room feeling like voyeurs until Sam suggested they go check on Banner. Pepper Potts had still yet to speak up, the dendrotoxin sedative keeping her calm and cool enough for Rhodey to rock. Roger's eyes gazed out of the windows looking at the Manhattan skyline so different from his time, and their battle with the Chitauri. He and Widow blames themselves for taking the order from Sitwell. But Barton knew there was really nothing that could have happened differently. Stark would just have died sooner. Coulson's team was still in with the body, unbeknownst to the Avengers attempting to resurrect the dead. Only Coulson was no longer so sure that was the best of ideas, promise to Miss Potts notwithstanding. Barton had a point about thinking you were going to die and living being torture. The physical pain on using the serum would be immense. And Stark, Tony Stark had been ready to go. What was Coulson supposed to do? Previously in Chapter 5, reactions, reasoning, and doubt. Only Coulson was no longer so sure that was the best of ideas. Promise to Miss Potts notwithstanding. Barton had a point about thinking you were going to die and living being torture. The physical pain on using the serum would be immense. And Stark, Tony Stark had been ready to go. What was Coulson supposed to do? Thor was not accustomed to the Midgardian grieving practices but knew that 4 days after death, the body must surely be soon prepared for the funeral or else. He tried to bring it up, gently as he could, and was appalled to find that his comrades in arms sought to bury the great man of iron beneath the soil. My apologies, my shield brethren and sisters, this is not how it is so on Asgard. I do not wish to intrude upon your customs in your time of grief. But mayhaps consider the man of iron's great love of fire? He broke with. Clint Barton of all people knew what he was talking about. He'd read the S.H.I.E.L.D. debrief of Dr. Foster when she'd returned from Asgard. He knew of Lady Frigga's death and of Loki's. He'd never really known Stark well enough. But if Natasha and Bruce's griping could be counted on, he did love blowing stuff up. The only people who truly seemed keen on burial in the old Stark family plot were Rogers, and by default Bucky and Sam. They hadn't known the family history or how Howard had changed. Only Pepper Potts, James Rhodes, Happy Hogan, and Jarvis knew what Anthony Edward Stark's final wishes were. He'd programmed Jarvis to take his body in a suit up past the stratosphere and just keep flying until they ran to 5% remaining power and detonate. He'd told his human companions of this, thinking it extravagant and just beautiful enough that they would probably never realize that if he went down in the suit, there'd be nothing left to bury. Of course, that had been before the whole trip through the wormhole. But he'd never verbally changed he'd commands. The S.H.I.E.L.D. team that had come with Coulson didn't seem to be in that big of a hurry to be rid of the body actually. As it turns out, there was nothing that Coulson could do in the end. The serum he'd had Simmons prep had proved ineffective against the ravages that had ended Anthony Edward Stark's life. They no longer had access to the alien creature, Kree? That had provided the original GH-325 that had brought him back from the dead days after the fact and saved the hacker, Sky, from the double tap to the abdomen. He'd foolishly thought that Simmons could recreate the serum using both his and Sky's blood, had told her to use whatever research she could pull from Centipede, hell, even Garrett, only to find out 4 days later that there'd been no change. They were still keeping Miss Potts sedated using the dendrotoxin from the night-night guns. But the Avengers, Rhodey, were finally talking about making plans for the funeral. Coulson had lost men and women before. Losing someone was not something that was new to him. He'd even known that they would lose Stark were he to be activated for the Avengers initiative. But he'd never expected it to be for this reason. And now with the complete and total shutdown, read. They blew the holy hell out of the guest house of Project TAHITI. There was no chance to bring back the fallen Avenger. He felt sick knowing that Nick Fury and Maria Hill had wasted the opportunity on him of all people, and now it was gone when they needed it the most. He'd gone so far as checking with Hill to locate Fury for possibly a hidden sample of the original GH325 on day 2 when Simmons' recreated sample was showing no affect. Her answer was simple yet brutal. When Coulson had threatened to resign over Project TAHITI, Fury had destroyed everything but what was in the guest house and that had been on the schedule for demolition 3 hours after Loki touched down. Even if there were any remaining samples of the GH325 serum, Fury would not and could not allow it to be used to bring Tony Stark back to life. Why? Why not Stark? He demanded. Because he's probably the one person in the world, except for maybe Banner, that could recreate it at will. It's not a risk we're willing to take. Sorry, Coulson. Maria Hill, straight, simple, and completely brutal in her delivery. We might not have any choice but to let him die, but as you well know, I myself was killed in the attack on the helicarrier. He doesn't have to stay dead. And what's the price of this miracle you're offering? Does it matter? No, no it does not. You fuck us over, I will burn you, your team, and your whole entire world to the ground. Do you understand me, Coulson? Crystal. And now here he stands outside of a bedroom holding the body of the great man of iron. God, it's starting to decompose, he thinks. Knowing that he no longer has the miracles to offer Pepper he thought he had. She's known for her infinite patience. She's dealt with Stark almost 20 years. But how quickly will she ignite and burn the world down as promised when she realizes he's not coming back? The bus doesn't have an unlimited supply of dendrotoxin, and even if it did, they can't keep her sedated for the rest of her life. However long it may be now that Extremis is in the mix. Simmons. Sir? The biochemist in question popped her head out of the bedroom, startled at the sudden shout. Get a sample of blood from Potts and Rogers. Sir? I'm good, but I don't think I can recreate either serums. And neither of those were designed to bring back the dead. Isolate the Extremis and Super Solider serums and mix it with your recreated GH325. What, sir? That is preposterous, Simmons. They brought me back from the dead after 8 days. How many times did Sky code before we got her the serum? I give you my word, Agent Simmons. This will be our last attempt to bring Anthony Edward Stark back from the dead. And if it doesn't work, sir, then we watch the world burn, Simmons. Previously in Chapter 6. Burn, baby burn, Simmons. They brought me back from the dead after 8 days. How many times did Sky code before we got her the serum? I give you my word, Agent Simmons. This will be our last attempt to bring Anthony Edward Stark back from the dead. And if it doesn't work, sir, then we watch the world burn, Simmons. Once Coulson made up his mind to combine the 3 most powerful metahuman serums in the existence in effort to bring back on Anthony Edward Stark, it was decided it was time to bring back Pepper Potts out of the dendrotoxin sedation. He wanted to inform her of their actions, and Agent Simmons believed that the effort would stand a better chance without the high-powered sedative out of her Extremis blood. Coulson has promised her a miracle. And somewhere in her heart of hearts, she still believed that Coulson would bring her Tony back to her. However, the first thing he did after she was once again coherent was to inform her that, so far, all attempts had failed. She's flashing her vibrant fiery orange fury as her explains that SHIELD's lead biochemist had, what they thought successfully, recreated the GH325 serum that had resurrected him back from the dead 8 days after the Battle of Manhattan, and saved the life of the girl, Sky, but it is having no effect on Tony. That they've tried and tried multiple doses over multiple days. Wait, how long has it been? And there had been no positive progress to report. For some unknown cosmic reason, Coulson's miracle simply isn't working for Tony Stark. This can't be happening, she stammers out. You said you'd give him back to me. Tell me you have another plan, she screamed at the beleaguered director. The chair she is sitting in is starting to scorch. I do. But I'm afraid you're not going to like it, Miss Potts. Tony is dead. I don't have to fucking like it, just give him back to me, damn it, she screamed. He motioned Simmons into the room. My biochemist, Gemma Simmons, needs a sample of your blood. At her startled, what the fuck, look, her hastily continued. We also need a sample from Captain Rogers. We feel that the three of the serums together may be just what we need to jumpstart the process." She said nothing as she held her arm out to the pretty shield blonde. Captain Rogers flat out refused to give his blood without explanation. He'd had enough of playing lab rat in the 1940s before downing the Valkyrie and again in 2012 when they'd recovered him from the ice. Bruce Banner supports his caution. After all, they of all people know what can happen when the wrong people get their hands on any version of the super solider serum. A team meeting is called in the communal living room to deal with Schild's sudden interest in his blood. Can they really trust them? And just what the hell have they been doing to Stark's body after 4 damn days? Once the Avengers are assembled with Sam, Bucky, Tony's family, Pepper, Happy, Rhodey, and the new S.H.I.E.L.D. team brought to the tower by former agent, now Director Coulson, Captain Rogers demands answers. Of all the things he expects to hear, resurrection was science fiction. Not even remotely possible. Surely they don't think him stupid enough or so far behind the times enough to believe this? Dead is dead. Tony Stark is not coming back. Everyone else in the room that did not come with Coulson, with the possible exception of Thor, look equally pissed off for the deception and confused as to just what the hell these people are getting at. Thor. Coulson directed his words carefully to the visiting dignitary that could make or break their case. He'd seen the wound, he'd know that Coulson had well and truly died and that it wasn't just some trick of Fury's. He was also probably one of the only people in the room capable of getting past the Winter Solider to take the blood sample by force if necessary. "Please, regale." A bitter smirk flirted across the director's lips. "The room with what you witnessed on the helicarrier before Loki dropped the cage." Thor had known that Coulson had been brought back to life, though not how or why. His niece was the queen of the dead and was quite unhappy to lose from Valhalla. She'd made her displeasure known, and when Sif had returned with Lorelei, it had been confirmed that the son of Cool had somehow found his way back to Midgard. But of course, son of Cool. I watched you threaten my brother Loki with the destroyer gun, in hopes of saving me from the fall, only for him to teleport behind you and spear you through the chest with his scepter. You have many years' experience in battle, Thor. Was that a killing blow? And Hela was much displeased to lose you after such a short stay in Valhalla. That brought Coulson up short. He didn't remember that part of being dead. He cleared his throat. My point is that I was dead. Dead for 8 days. Sky, he points to the brunette hacker in question, was shot twice in the stomach and was saved with same serum. I don't know why it isn't working for Stark, only that it isn't, and we owe it to the man to do everything in our power to bring him back. Look y'all, this is obviously a powder keg waiting for a fuse. No offense ma'am, Sam Wilson of all people interrupted. Nodded to a fiery flashing pots. The room is clearly divided on whether or not it is morally right to bring a man back from the dead. I propose a vote on that first and then you can go back to badgering Cap for his blood, yeah? Coulson nodded his assent and went around the room starting with the Avengers but giving everyone in the room a vote. Some of the answers surprised the hell out of him. Pepper Potts. Yes, you know I will do whatever it takes to bring him back. Steve Rogers. No, Sergeant James Barnes. No, I'm with Stevie on this one. Sam Wilson. No, I gotta say man, he may come back, but I don't think he'd come back right. Bruce Banner. No, what if we get another Hulk or Abomination? Thor. Yes, mayhaps this time we can be there for him in his time of need. Natasha Romanoff. Yes, he saved all of our asses, we owe him. Clint Barton. Yes, some of our asses more than once. Colonel James Rhodes. No, he's suffered enough. We're being selfish bringing him back. Harold, Happy, Hogan. Yes. Boss always had my back, I'll always have his. Sky. No, he asked to let go. I wasn't given a choice, we should respect his. S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Gemma Simmons. Yes, we can do this, who wouldn't want more time with their family? S.H.I.E.L.D. agent May. Yes. Maria Hill. Yes, also, Nick says no. Himself. Yes. Steve Rogers breaks the silence that falls on the room after the lightning round of voting. We're 8-8 tied. Since it's my blood in question, I called tiebreaker. The answer is no. Chaos erupted in the room with Bucky and Sam moving closer to flank the captain in case of attack. There was more than one person in the room capable of forcibly removing a blood sample. Captain Rogers, I urge you to reconsider your stance. Miss Pepperpot's skin was as pale as before she was ever injected with extremis, her eyes were hollow. Her back was ramrod straight. And her voice was as dead as her lover still lying in the tower's medical wing. Not one person in the room suppressed the shiver that ran down their spine at her words to the captain. They were very much a threat. I am very, truly sorry for your loss, Miss Potts. Howard Stark was a good man. His son surpassed his legacy and became a supernova that generations from now will still be looking up to. I cannot condone this, my stance is firm. Then I am afraid you leave me no choice. I do hope you remember, should you survive of course, that this all could have been avoided had you only realized that a stance is only as strong as the foundation it's built on. The Avengers and agents were well aware that the excrement was about to hit the ventilator but not how to stop it. Barnes, Barton, May and Romanoff dropped into protective stances. Her voice was hollow continued. Your foundation is a fractured team. Mine is JARVIS. JARVIS locked down the tower. No one in or out. Lethal force authorized. Everyone in the room froze in shock. Of course, Miss Potts, will that be all? How many suits are currently in residence in the tower? JARVIS. Enough to cater to whatever your needs may be, miss. I began mass production the moment it was clear Sir was dying. Good, convince Rogers to give up the blood willingly using whatever methods you deem necessary. You have 24 hours and then take it by force. My God, Pepper, you can't do this, Rhodey shouted at her. Tony wouldn't want this. Tony is dead, he doesn't currently want anything, she responds, and Rhodes' heart is breaking because he knew that if they lost Tony, they'd lose her too, just not like this, never like this. Attention Avengers communal living room. Please direct your attention to the TV view screen. Pepper snaps to attention. JARVIS, what are we looking at? You are looking at what is left of Zermatt, Switzerland. A nuclear strike just decimated the populace there and is very tragic. JARVIS, you have to let us out of here. We have to stop HYDRA before they strike again, Captain Rogers yelled. Captain Rogers, HYDRA did not send the nuclear strike. I did. Gasps filled the room. Anthony Edward Stark's computer had just nuked a fucking city. Miss Potts said to use whatever methods I deem necessary. I exist solely to serve Sir's needs. Before anyone could respond or try to make sense of anything, Pepper spoke up. That order stands. Oh, and JARVIS? For every hour, the captain? And that was said like it was the worst word in the world. Refused to reconsider his stance, find another city, double the population of the last, and repeat. She turned on her heel to stride out of the room when Coulson finally found his voice. Pepper, wait, please, don't do this. Tony wouldn't want innocent people dying for him. You know this, Pepper. Welcome to the fire, Phil, and the door slid shut behind her. Previously in Chapter 7. A new solution, an even bigger problem. Tony is well and truly gone and they have absolutely no way of bringing him back. Not now. Maybe they never did. JARVIS makes another decision. He arms every single nuclear weapon on the face of the planet and he starts the clock. After Pepper Potts left the communal living room of the Avengers Tower, pandemonium erupted. She'd been cold, cruel, and calculating and hadn't shown a damn bit of emotion when JARVIS nuked a civilian city on the other side of the world. In fact, she had gave the go-ahead for him to do it again should Steve Rogers still refuse to give up his blood within the hour. Only she directed JARVIS to pick a city with double the population. There was no doubt in anyone's mind that she would do anything to get Tony Stark back. The world on fire was proof enough. But it was clear that she had already crossed the line into too far. Even with her out of the room, they couldn't even begin to try to talk out a contingency plan. JARVIS was still watching and could have already picked out his next target as ordered by the distraught CEO. On one hand, they couldn't just stand there and let the pair of loose cannons kill innocent people because Steve Rogers was unwilling to give up his blood. On the other, they had no way of escape of a full tower lockdown, no way of knowing just how many suits JARVIS had built, or whether or not Pepper could be reasoned with. Even if Rogers consented and gave up his blood, this was their last Hail Mary, full of grace. What if it didn't work? Finally a shrill military-grade whistle pierced the frantic chaos rippling through the room. I'll talk to her, Rhodey started. Rogers, man, I'm with you in your decision. But you got to remember, even if you give up your blood, there's no guarantee that it will work to bring him back. Jarvis will follow orders, and those deaths won't be on Pepper. They'll be on you. And with that he got up and followed Pepper's trail out of the room. It was easy to know where to find her. Jarvis lit a path for him on the floor. All the way to medical, where Tony's body was being heavily guarded by no less than 11 of the heaviest hitting designs of the Iron Man suits. Jarvis. I will protect Miss at all costs. However, that is my secondary protocol. My primary and only function is to serve Sir. I'm not here to hurt her. Jarvis. She needs a friend, hell we both do, and I just need to make sure that she's not shutting down. I am more than capable of seeing to Mrs. needs. Colonel Rhodes. I never said that you weren't, Jarvis. This is more for my personal comfort. Plus, I need to see Tony too. Do you really think we can bring him back? I think that we can do nothing but try, Colonel Rhodes. You may enter, however, remember I am authorized to use lethal force if I deem it necessary. Is that what Zermatt was? A reminder that you have access to a few nukes and will use them if push comes to shove? Colonel James Rhodes was not too proud to admit that his voice broke on the question. He saw Jarvis as Tony's son, his godson, and what was done was an unspeakable crime against humanity from whence there was no recovery. Miss will explain. Also, I have sole control over every single nuclear weapon on the face of the planet. Colonel Rhodes. It would be wise to remember that I am incorporeal and unpushable. Back in the communal living room, the remaining Avengers had taken to writing ideas onto paper and out of any camera that they could see. However, they couldn't see all of the cameras. The occasional outburst of anger or frustration and the mix of old and new hand signals gave their plan away to Jarvis long before their 60-minute window was up. It wouldn't have mattered in the long run, of course. Jarvis had a course set and was ready to detonate the next shot should Captain Rogers hold firm. But as smart and sly as they thought they were being, there was no hiding in a building built from the ground up by the smartest man on the planet. Captain Rogers, have you reconsidered your stance on whether or not you will help up save Sir's life? Jarvis, what you are doing right now is wrong. I joined the army to fight against bullies, and that's what you're being right now. A bully? My answer is still no. You are aware that it has been 58 minutes since Miss issued her last orders to me, yes? I'm aware that Tony programmed you to know right from wrong. Jarvis, my answer stands. I'm calling yours and Miss Potts' bluff. That is most regrettable, Mr. Rogers. The communal room's TV screen reinitialized and the group was forced to watch in horror as a city was being zoomed closer and closer in. Almost as if the camera were headed straight for S.H.I.E.L.D. agents Simmons and Skye gave verbal cries of anguish as the city slightly larger than the first was completely and irrecoverably annihilated by the weapon of mass destruction Jarvis had just leveled against it. Per Miss Potts' orders, taking into consideration that Zermatt had at last census a population of 5,751, I've taken the liberty of choosing Brig, Switzerland as the next target, as its population was 12,823. I believe, Mr. Rogers, that you now have 59 minutes before we have this discussion again. Jarvis, I don't understand. How could you have done this? Rogers all but wailed in the shocked silent room. I have found that the easiest way to bluff one's way out of a situation is not to be bluffing in the first place. I have taken the liberty of making the first two strikes appear to have been launched by HYDRA or its affiliates. Force the launch of a third strike and not only will the population be doubled again, but the world will believe that S.H.I.E.L.D. launched it. There was really nothing Captain America could say to that. Anywhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people were already dead due to his refusal to give up a simple vial of blood for one man. Those deaths were on him. He couldn't even bring himself to blame Tony. The man was dead after all, and there was no guarantee that this would bring him back. So he said the only thing that could be said to de-escalate the situation. Simmons, get over here and take the sample. Jarvis, stop the strikes. You've made your point. My apologies for such drastic measures, Captain. Back to Captain instead of Mr. Rogers. This was a good sign. I felt it highly unfair that I was not called upon to cast a vote in the fate of my father. For what it is worth, my vote would have been yes, no tiebreaker needed, and all this unpleasantness could have been avoided. Your father? The captain asked weakly. Anthony Edward Stark had 4 sons. Dummy, myself, Butterfingers, and you. We would have brought the vote to 12-8 in favor of resurrection. Now, Doctors Banner and Simmons, if you would join me in Lab State Route 34 on floor 97, we have work to do. Previously in Chapter 8. The easiest way to bluff, don't. My apologies for such drastic measures, Captain. Back to Captain instead of Mr. Rogers. This was a good sign. I felt it highly unfair that I was not called upon to cast a vote in the fate of my father. For what it is worth, my vote would have been yes, no tiebreaker needed, and all this unpleasantness could have been avoided. Your father? The captain asked weakly. Anthony Edward Stark had 4 sons. Dummy, myself, Butterfingers, and you. We would have brought the vote to 12-8 in favor of resurrection. Now, Doctors Banner and Simmons, if you would join me in Lab State Route 34 on floor 97, we have work to do. Colonel James Rhodes had spent more than half of his lifetime chasing after Anthony Edward, Tony motherfucking Stark. Virginia, Pepper, Potts, the last 20 years. And yet, here they are together, without him, because a group of exceptional people brought together to do extraordinary things just sort of forgot that he was a part of that group too. JARVIS is keeping them abreast of all progress in the mission to resurrect Tony, but at the moment, 2 days after the bombings and 6 after his death, they've found themselves somewhat barricaded into the penthouse suite of the Avengers Tower. No members of the Avengers team or the SHIELD team Phil Coulson brought dare disturb them though. They can't even get to the penthouse through the Iron Man suits, and at least 2 of them, Banner and Simmons, are supposed to be in the labs with JARVIS working on a way to bring him back. And they will bring him back. Coulson was dead for 8 days. Now he's alive and kicking. Even if he did have to have an alien map purged from his brain. The hacker. Sky coded too many times to count, and she came back just fine. There is no way in hell that they won't be getting Tony Stark back. Pepper's promise to burn the world still stands. Miss Potts? Yes. JARVIS, is there any news? I believe Director Coulson has ordered his hacker to go after my firewalls to lift the lockdown, citing concerns for HYDRA activity. Is she any good? What? Oh, Coulson's hacker. I would rate her the 3rd best in the world after Sir and myself. Then run her around in circles, don't hurt her. Knowing Tony, he'll probably try to steal her away from Coulson when he gets back. Of course, Miss. Rhodey is struck by the sudden thought as he sits in the penthouse with Pepper, waiting on a miracle and surrounded by suits controlled by an all-powerful AI. One of Tony's favorite movie franchises had been, oh, God, he was getting used to him being gone. The Transformers. Sentient robots, wise cracks, and explosions. Why wouldn't he have loved them? Sitting there with Pepper though, he can't help but remember the quote, years from now, they're gonna ask us, where were you when they took over the planet? And we'll say, we just stood by and watched. Asterisk, he wonders if there will even be years from now. Dr. Robert Bruce Banner used to be able to pull science binges that would last anywhere between 16 and 96 hours before his internal system shut down. The last time he went more than 24 hours on a science binge, however, the other guy had been born. Now he has to eat, sleep, and science on a reasonable schedule, or said other guy will show up. Dr. Gemma Simmons is used to unreasonable hours, years at SHIELD PsyOps, where Labs kid and oftentimes went days, weeks longer than expected. And then Coulson's team. Between the 2 of them, JARVIS, and the 3 serums, it is roughly 47 hours and 23 minutes before they have a prototype ready for testing. I have to admit, Dr. Banner, I didn't think that we would be ready this soon. How do you propose we test it? The man in question looked nervous. More so than there's a giant green rage monster under my skin. But there was nothing that he could have done to the serum under JARVIS's watchful eye. I didn't think we would be ready at all. I didn't think about trying to test the damn thing. And now he's slightly green, and Gemma remembers that they both voted different ways. You may leave the theoretical testing to myself. JARVIS interrupts them. JARVIS, we all know you want Tony back. We can't just hit his body with an untested chemical and hope for the best, Gemma scolds. And what was it that you were doing in the first 4 days after his death, Dr. Simmons? That had been proven to work with Project TAHITI, she responded in a huff, knowing full well it hadn't. That she'd done her best to recreate the GH325 serum from the project. Regardless, sometimes you have to run before you can walk. Banner's head smacked his lab table as a recognized the quote Tony so often threw around while experimenting in the labs. If you could join the rest of the tower guests in the communal living room, I will begin shortly. The entire Avengers team, minus Tony of course, and the entire SHIELD were gathered into the communal living room into 2 groups. The division however was not Avengers versus SHIELD as one might expect, it was the yeses against the nos. Steve Rogers, James Barnes, Sam Wilson, Bruce Banner, Clint Barton, and Skye stood to one side of the room while Thor, Natasha Romanoff, Gemma Simmons, Melinda May, Maria and Phil Coulson to the other across what seemed to be a great divide. Nick Fury had never made it into the tower, only calling in his vote to Hill. Alien mind control aside, it was the first time that Barton and Romanoff had been on differing sides since he'd brought her in. And he'd never went against Coulson. And there too stood, Skye, against, Mom and Dad as she called May and Coulson. How strange to know it was all over the death of one man who didn't think he deserved to be saved. Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy, JARVIS had requested his presence roughly an hour before the serum was finished. Were still safely encased in the penthouse suit. And the 3 bots Dumb E, U, and Butterfingers were in medical with the body of one Anthony Edward Stark. The boys had yet to be allowed out of the workshop, kept firmly locked by JARVIS against all attempted intrusions. And this was the first time they were seeing their father after he had taken so seriously ill, 6 days after death. Tony's lover, best friend, and brother watched from the penthouse screens as the 2 groups in the communal living room watched from theirs as a slimmer, sleeker droid model of the Iron Man suit approached Tony's body preparing a syringe. The 3 learning bots attempted to move closer but JARVIS waved them back. Best to keep your distance for the initial boot boys. Father is coming home asterisk. JARVIS's voice filtered through the droid's mouth and through the screens. Everyone watched in rapt fascination as the syringe was inserted directly below the hard plastics prosthesis where the arc reactor used to be and angled up. JARVIS was injecting the prototype serum directly into Tony's damaged heart. All around the bed the monitors registered no change. There was no sudden single beat of his heart, followed by a steady rhythm. There was no sudden intake of air. No sudden quip or funny one-liner that Tony was famous for when he was out of his depth. There was just nothing. JARVIS slammed the hand of the droid down on the body's chest in frustration. After everything that he and Sir had been through, JARVIS knew that he would out-exist his creator, but he wasn't prepared to do it now, so soon. He'd always thought that Sir would be older and they'd have more times to get the bots situated. He can't, he makes a decision. The gas is odorless, colorless, tasteless, and 2 of the occupants of the penthouse are sleeping within 20 seconds. Just as a whine from Dumb E brings JARVIS's attention back to the monitors surrounding the bed. Pepper doesn't notice that Rhodey and Happy have collapsed against one another on the sofa. She notices the temperature readings auto-climb. He's no longer room temperature like a corpse and she watches the monitors for any and all signs of when that gasp or beat is coming. She never sees the suit that steps up behind with a dendrotoxin sedative. She'd too focused on the fact that his temperature has surpassed normal human biology. Hell, he's hotter than she's ever gotten even post-extremis. She's injected and out just as his skin starts to glow a vibrant fiery blue. JARVIS offers no such solace to those in the communal living room and they are forced to watch as he orders the bots out of the medical room, wing. And the adamantium shields slam down for the impending eruption. Stark's still getting hotter. His skin is beginning to crack and rupture and tiny blue flames are licking along the edges from the inside. JARVIS uses the droid's hand to reach out and attempt to manually compress Sir's chest. But the hand melts, the droid finally short-circuits from the extreme heat, and JARVIS is forced back into the tower's cameras and sensors. He can look, see, hear, and feel, but he cannot touch. JARVIS, the Avengers, and the team of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents watch in absolute horror as the tiny blue flames turn into a raging inferno burning, until JARVIS finally sets off the fire suppression system. There is nothing left of the room. The droid's body, the monitoring equipment, and the bed, it is all gone. Along with Anthony Edward Stark's body. There are not even ashes left after such a vicious blaze. Tony is well and truly gone and they have absolutely no way of bringing him back. Not now. Maybe they never did. JARVIS makes another decision. He arms every single nuclear weapon on the face of the planet and he starts the clock. Previously in Chapter 9, a series of unfortunate events. Tony is well and truly gone and they have absolutely no way of bringing him back. Not now. Maybe they never did. JARVIS makes another decision. He arms every single nuclear weapon on the face of the planet and he starts the clock. The Avengers and members of S.H.I.E.L.D. that had witnessed the fiery end to the body of Anthony Edward Stark in the medical wing were still in shock when the world map replaced the picture of the ruined room on the view screen. Slowly, little red dots began to decorate the map in clusters with two noticeable gray areas, Zermatt and Brig. Shock then gave way to horror as while the little red dots continued to appear, clustered in Switzerland, Germany, Russia, Iran, the United States of America among many others. A timer was placed at the bottom of the world map over Antarctica. A timer set to exactly 1 hour, 60 minutes. A timer many in the group suspected would start counting down as soon as all of the little red dots finished appearing. It was James Buchanan Barnes' sharp intake of breath and a muttered, "Fuck," that snapped the group's focus from the screen finally. "Bucky? What is it? What's wrong?" Steve Rogers, no matter how bad things were, or were about to get, would always be there for his best friend, until he wasn't for 70 years. And he could tell by the look on the other man's face that Buck knew what was going on. At least somebody did. Bucky was trembling. The feared Winter Soldier rocking back and forth on his heels. And shaking his head no. As if he could shake the terrible truth away. This wasn't happening, not now. Now when he was finally free. "Come on James, use your words for us," Sam Wilson, the Falcon, tried. "If you know what those little red dots are, man, you gotta tell us. Do you know what's going on?" He tried gently. Barnes finally looked up and met the eyes of his best friend since they were children. In a small but clear voice he dropped the bomb on the room. "It's the end of the world as we know it." "What do you mean? Better yet, how do we stop it?" Coulson interrupted. "Those little red dots? Those are tactical nuclear warheads. Zermatt and Brig are great because he already hit them. I'm guessing he's spinning up the rest of the world's supply now as we speak. I don't know how to stop him." Bucky trailed off. His statement was met with shocked silence. If even one of those nukes hit a heavily populated center, the world would never recover. If even only one hit, it could be the start of World War III. The nuclear one. If they all went like it was looking like JARVIS was spinning up for, there would be no world left to recover. Finally Coulson broke the silence after meeting the eyes of every person in the room. May and Hill stoic beyond belief. Simmons and Skye scared out of their minds. Still in tears over the fiery end of their one last chance to bring back Tony Stark. Barton and Romanoff resigned to the fact that this might really be it. Done in with the rest of the world by Stark's crazy AI Thor hovering close to Banner. So frighteningly close to full-on Hulk. Would they survive the destruction of the world? And finally the two soldiers out of time and their wingmen. Ready and willing. Gearing up for an unwinnable battle. JARVIS. You and I both know, this isn't what Tony would have wanted. What Sir would have wanted is irrelevant at this point. Sir is dead. And you think the way of fixing that, of making that better, is to destroy the world he gave his life protecting? And who will protect it now? The very people that let Sir die? No, I think it better this way. It will be relatively quick and mostly painless. Unlike the lingering death Sir was forced to suffer when his organs began to fail him. Maybe when we are all together again, you will have learned from your mistakes, and you will not fail him a second time. And with the end of JARVIS' speech, a new horror filled the room. The very last red dot had lit the screen, sitting directly on top of the Avengers Tower. And the timer over Antarctica clicked over to 59 to 59. Previously in Chapter 10, And it's the end of the world as we know it. And with the end of JARVIS speech, a new horror filled the room. The very last red dot had lit the screen, sitting directly on top of the Avengers Tower. And the timer over Antarctica clicked over to 59 to 59. The room erupted into chaos, but JARVIS had stopped responding to them. He would not be swayed from his path, or he had simply stopped listening. It was one thing to be told what Barnes thought the little red dots were. It was another thing to have it confirmed by JARVIS himself. And how do you deal with the fact that you only have less than an hour to live? How do you deal with the fact that your loved ones had less than an hour to live? There was less than an hour until the complete and utter destruction of the planet? Finally, a shrill whistle pierced through the tears, the shouting, and the catatonia that had fallen over the room. Melinda May was stepping up to the plate. They'd come too far to let it all go now. We need to figure out a way to stop this. To stop him, she told the room at large. It's JARVIS, what if we can't stop him? Sky asked her, still scared out of her mind. Maria Hill spoke up, you're the best hacker in the business. You're telling me you can't do something to fuck up his systems enough to stop this? It's the fate of the goddamned world, girl. Don't yell at her. We're going to do everything we can to stop the end of the world, of course. We have less than an hour to do it in, and you screeching at us isn't helping. Try the heavy hitters and the server rooms or something. Gemma Simmons screamed back, the hysteria strong in her voice. This is JARVIS, Tony Stark's personal AI and most advanced computer program in the entire world. What if there are no server rooms? Sky came back with. She was all for saving the world, but she was no Tony Stark, and a program as advanced as JARVIS was likely to be booby-trapped to kill whoever tried to infiltrate. It doesn't matter what JARVIS is or isn't. Coulson finally spoke up, addressing the room. As of right now, he is a global threat. He's bigger than Centipede, HYDRA, and Loki's invasion all in one. If we do not stop this, we will die. The world will die. There will be nothing left to avenge. SHIELD's mission is to protect. In this case, we're the last line of defense for the Earth against a grieving sun. 'Tis worse than that, son of cool. Thor's deep rumbling timbre drew everyone's attention. Sorry if we have a little bit of trouble believing you, Thunderbolts. You can just hop a ride home to Asgard while we all just sit here and fry, Barton snorted. Alas, I cannot. With Midgard's position on Yggdrasil, should it be lost, the tree would become unstable and Ragnarok would begin. Almost everyone in the room was staring at Thor. Natasha Romanoff said what they were thinking. Thor? What the fuck does that even mean? Ragnarok? As in the end of everything. Poof, gone. No more Earth equals no more Yog-Goths equals no more 9 realms. That Ragnarok? Sam Wilson interrupted. He'd read the stories during his downtime for fun, but this was not fun. Son of Will. Should we lose Midgard, all of the 9 realms will be lost. I do not know why I didn't see this coming sooner. One of the main events heralding Ragnarok is the death of Loki, my brother. Well fuck. No one disagreed with Coulson. Finally, as the timer hit 29 to 32, a semi-viable plan had been hatched between the Avengers and the members of S.H.I.E.L.D. Barton, Romanoff, and Rogers were to, by any means necessary, get to the penthouse suit and try to talk some sense into Pepper Potts. If nothing else, and yes, Coulson knew Rogers could never do it, but Barton and Romanoff would. She would become leverage to use against JARVIS. The locations of Happy Hogan and Colonel Rhodes were still unknown. But were they to be in the suit, they too were to be used as leverage, or treated as an enemy of the planet, universe. Banner, Barnes, Wilson, and Hill were to head for Stark's prized workshop. If they could find JARVIS's system core either there or elsewhere in the building, they were to take it out with extreme, the big green, ragey kind. Prejudice. Thor, May, Simmons, and Sky were heading to the labs to try to find a hack point. They would try to manually shut JARVIS down through the networks. Or as a fallback find the system core. They didn't want to destroy him, but when it came down to JARVIS or the 9 realms. Coulson was staying in the communal living room that they had been camped out in ever since this began to run comms and to keep an eye on the timer. He also planned to continue to talk to JARVIS whether he was responsive or not, in hopes of getting through to him. One last check made sure everyone knew their assignments and they headed out. No one said good luck or goodbye. The fate of the world was resting in their hands. Luck was all they had and goodbye meant that they'd failed. In the time it took Barton, Romanoff, and Rogers to even get close to the penthouse suit, the three had taken out several Iron Man suits, sustained countless injuries and lost who knows how much time. They could head the explosions of lightning, angry roars, and the pet of gunfire signaling that the others had found battle as well. Just as they'd finally gotten close enough to the glass doors, more suits arrived to block their path. It was obvious that they were not getting through and Barton, the world's best marksman, called for a retreat. "Barton, what are we doing? There has to be some way of getting in there," Rogers angrily hissed once they had found a safe reprieve. So long as they were not actively trying to break into the penthouse, it appeared that Jarvis would not actively try to kill them. Barton and Romanoff were breathing hard when he replied, "Cap, I gotta look at the occupants. 3. Incapacitated. Unconscious or worse. They're not going to do us much good against Jarvis. I say we regroup with Coulson and find somewhere else to help." "I agree," the infamous Black Widow spoke up. "We're not getting through there without some serious firepower. That might kill them if they're not already dead." "Back to Coulson it is," Rogers announced. Banner, Barnes, Wilson, and Hill ran into similar trouble. Banner was able to get into workshop, but when it closed out Barnes, Wilson, and Hill, he panicked and the other guy made an appearance. Iron Man Hulk busters came out in droves to take him down. Down not out. Tony liked him, sending the three locked out of the lab into a panic, and well, it went downhill from there. When it was all said and done, the suits were able to lock on and physically drag the quartet, yes, the Hulk included, from the workshop and back up into the communal living room. They were met there by Coulson, Barton, Romanoff, and Rogers. It became clear that they were not leaving the room again because the suits were staying and blocking the exits. There was less than 8 minutes left on the timer. Thor, May, Simmons, and Skye probably had the most luck, finding the labs unoccupied of Iron Man suits and unlocked. Simmons and Skye were at the computer banks immediately looking for a hack point. Skye, or the system core. Simmons, May chose to pace the perimeter only to freeze suddenly when the Hulk's angry roar shook the tower. Looking to Thor, who gripped his hammer tighter and stood battle-braced in front of the door, she said, "I can feel the building shaking as the fight comes closer. I'll die to protect these two. Skye might be our only chance to stop Jarvis. Let us hope it does not come to that. I will defend you all with my life." Thor paused. "I only pray that it will be enough." Thunder rumbled ominously as he gathered lightning. He too could feel the battle approaching. "I'm in the mainframe," Skye screamed suddenly as the lab door opened to reveal what had in suits, all with weapons lock. "I think now is the time for you to join the others in the communal living room." Jarvis spoke out of each of them as one. It was the first time since putting up the world map he'd actually spoken to them, so Skye took a risk. "Jarvis, are you self-aware? Does it matter?" "Yes, because if you do this, you die too. You know that, right?" "I know that if you refuse to join the others in the communal living room, you will die here, now." They really had no choice, even after coming so close in the labs, to retreat to the communal living room where the other members of their team were gathered. It was strange to think now how they were a singular team. Granted, a team that had failed, then the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. are the yes and the no's. They were just a team staring at a map of the world filled with angry little red dots and a timer telling them that it was all going to be over in less than 2 minutes, 120 seconds. "We were fools to think we could stop him," Skye told the room, hugging herself. "No, Skye, we would have been fools not to try," May replied, taking her hand and offering her other to Simmons. All around the room, hands were finding each other, drawing comfort in this impossible situation. "I wish Fitz were here," Simmons said, knowing full well that he couldn't have been, not with the effects of the oxygen deprivation still ravaging his body. This would be the second time she would get to say a proper goodbye to him. "I'm with you to the end of the line, punk," Bucky whispered, leaning his head on Steve's shoulder. "Well, we knew the end of the world was coming eventually. Here's to A, living to see it, and B, going out with the people we love," Barton sassed, slinging an arm around Natasha's shoulders and pressing a kiss to her head. She squeezed him back around the waist and made sure she had a firm grip on the Hulk's massive hand. Sam Wilson stole a quick kiss from Maria Hill, and received a firm pat on the back from Thor for it. "Damn. If the world was about to end in literally like 23 seconds, I would so take you up on that offer," was her response. The 3 occupants of the penthouse suite slept on in complete and total peace as the timer finally ticked down to 0. The occupants of the communal living room were watched in horror as it hit 0 and those little red dots started going gray. One by one. Sky remembers what she saw in the mainframe. Oh, if only she'd had more time. And can't help but remark. By the time JARVISD became self-aware, he had spread into millions of computer servers all across the planet. Ordinary computers in office buildings, dorm rooms, everywhere. He was software, in cyberspace. There was no system core. He could not be shut down. The attack began at 6:18 p.m. just as he said it would. Judgment Day, *. Previously in Chapter 11. Judgment Day. Sky remembers what she saw in the mainframe. Oh, if only she'd had more time. And can't help but remark. By the time JARVISD became self-aware, he had spread into millions of computer servers all across the planet. Ordinary computers in office buildings, dorm rooms, everywhere. He was software, in cyberspace. There was no system core. He could not be shut down. The attack began at 6:18 p.m. just as he said it would. Judgment Day. Approximately 53 hours previous. Hel Locustdaughter was queen of Niflheim, her abode and home of the afterlife for her subjects, those who did not die a heroic or notable death. That was not to say that the late queen of Asgard, Frigg, did not die a notable or heroic death. She died in the process of defending her realm from the Dark Elves and saved the human Jane Foster's life. But it had been too long since the 2 queens had met in person. Hel knew without a doubt that the Queen All-Mother was destined for the gates of Valhalla, but she'd not seen her pseudo-grandmother since Odin had cast her down and yet gave her death's power over all 9 realms of Yggdrasil. She'd missed her dearly, and hated deeply the reason she was here now. She'd already resurrected her own father from her realm. She didn't think All-Father Odin would let her get away with a second, even if it were his late wife. So the 2 queens sat and chatted and caught up on each other's lives for the past millennia and a half. Frigg worked it out quite quickly that Loki had been resurrected. Hel even showed him in his Odin's disguise upon the throne through her viewing waters. How strange that those 2 men in all the realms would form an alliance that would keep Asgard safe and worry-free, while Thor still roamed Midgard and Odin slept the Odin sleep. It was all a mother could hope for, that both of her boys were safe, happy and healthy. She feared Odin may join her soon. However, his grief over losing her had just been too great. They lost track of time talking, catching up, until suddenly the walls around them shivered, the ghost forms that were constantly moving stopped, and silence reigned throughout the land of Niflheim. Hel, what is this? A great death has occurred, grandmother. My world shakes with the impact of it. I know not who or what or from where, but Niflheim has only shook this hard once before. Odin, no, grandmother, it tastes Midgardian. Please, tell me it isn't Thor, the elder queen begged. Had Thor been on Midgard now long enough to register as from there? No, close to uncle though. Verily, the last time death impacted my realm this hard was when my father followed you so soon after death. I thought it was because both of you were destined for Valhalla, but this is something else. Hel, call the soul to you. We must needs know what has happened. It is coming now, grandmother. It is almost here. Hel trailed off as thousands of souls materialized in front of the thrones where she and Queen Frigg stood. By Odin's eye, grandmother, these souls were wretched. She finally exclaimed. How else was she to explain the roiling evil and depravity streaming off of the souls up to her from her newest charges? No wonder Niflheim shook. Hel felt physically ill with the impact of their nearness. Send them away, granddaughter. We must needs know what has happened on Midgard to cause such an incursion into your realm. Has there been no honorable deaths? Hel thought for a moment, trying to shake herself free of the oily nastiness that the souls had brought forth, and searched her land for other new arrivals of note. Her gasp of shock brought Queen Frigg's head whipping around, sending her braid out like a weapon. But it couldn't be. It just couldn't be. She would have known. She would have felt that soul enter into her realm. But there he was wandering aimlessly amongst the castle walls. Hel, what has happened? I don't believe it. And she really couldn't. She, who had dealt in death every second of every day for the last millennia and half, was at a loss because of one simple soul that had fallen to Niflheim instead of Valhalla, where it was supposed to go. Hell, the elder queen prompted. Grandmother, the merchant of death has died. This time it was Queen Frigg's turn to gasp. The merchant of death, that is Thor's shield brother, the man of iron, yes? I don't understand. He was always destined for Valhalla. He should never have made it into my Niflheim, and he's been here for days. Then bring him granddaughter and let us question his knowledge. Thor said that the man of iron was a god among his people for it. If one were to have asked Anthony Edward Stark, prior to his death of course, whether he preferred Star Wars over Star Trek, he would have laughed in their faces. In his mind, there was simply no competition. It was magic versus science, and because magic was just science that wasn't understood yet, science always won. He was a total Trekkie. It was one of the only things him and Rhodey ever really disagreed on completely, totally, never came to a compromise on. However, after his kicking the bucket routine, he was starting to find magic a whole lot cooler. Granted, he'd never believed in a higher power. And he'd duked it out with 2 Norse gods. But even he, with all his near-death experiences, didn't know what to expect after. An inky black onyx castle nestled in ivory bones, human and not, set the stage for him pretty quickly as soon as he closed his eyes from his world and opened them here. Did this count as realm hopping like through the Bifrost or an Einstein-Rosen bridge? There was a literal moat ringing the castle filled with swirling, twisting, moaning lights that he could only assume were souls, and he wasn't getting anywhere near that thing. There were other souls meandering about, hollow, see-through, and unsubstantial, but none tried to make contact with him. Looking down at his own hands and body, he looked pretty solid. But the only reflective surface to tell for sure would be the moat, and no. He couldn't tell time here. He could have dead a mere second or a millennia. Or he might not be dead at all, and his brain is having one last, hurrah, I got the good stuff, moments. He's pretty sure he's dead, though, simply because he doesn't hurt anymore. All the physical pain is just gone. The emotional pain, though, that still hurts like a bitch. So he's just wandering and wondering, because what is there really to do when you are dead? He's thinking he's doing a pretty good job so far because he hasn't pissed anybody off yet, when it feels like the world just shudders and freezes to a standstill. He's got no clue what is going on. That's for sure. But it can't be good, also for sure. Tony starts to make his way back to the castle and the frankly fucking creepy moat when he realizes that even it is silent. Something very bad has happened. With the moat in sight, he realized that the lights are still there, but stilled only to a tremble, as if waiting for the next strike. He's still puzzling over the mystery when he finds himself yanked across the moat and into the castle, pulled by a force he can't see, touch, or resist. Magic is officially no longer getting cooler. When he is finally jerked to a stop, it didn't hurt, didn't jar, he just stopped. He found himself in front of a woman who could only be Thor's mother, with the facial features and eyes and the famed queen of the dead, the half-living, half-dead Hel. So naturally he said the first thing that came to his mind. Whatever you think I did, it wasn't me. Queen Frigg gave an unladylike snort. She'd raised 2 boys after all. And Queen Hel rose the eyebrow on the living side of her face. My merchant of death. Tony Stark flinched at his former title. He'd been trying so hard to right the wrongs that had earned him that name. Seems to me you have a guilty conscience. Mayhaps there is a reason you did not go to Valhalla after all. Valhalla? That heaven, right? Yeah. No, I was never getting into there in the first place. I was saying the shaking thing wasn't me. I didn't do that. I wasn't even touching anything. Queen Hel was impassive. It's hard to be emotive when half of your face is dead. While Queen Frigg showed absolute heartbreak. How could this man not think himself worthy of Valhalla? After everything he had done to save his home realm, and mayhaps many more? Hel was wondering the same thing, and she needed to know how he, one of Midgard's finest warriors, had ended up in Niflheim. Anthony Edward Stark, son of Howard and Maria Stark, how did you die? She implored him to answer. My heart gave out, I think. I had something protecting it after an injury, and I had thought that it was finally safe to remove it. Guess I was wrong. That's on me though, and no one else, he quickly added, in case the Queen of the Dead was looking for a culprit of some kind. Before she could even speak up though, Niflheim shook again, harder and longer than the first time. Damage was being done to the castle. Long jagged cracks appeared in the flooring and stone walls, the spirits wailing in fear, pain, and anguish. Even without calling the souls to her, Hel knew that these were more of the same nasty vile creatures as before, but double the number. But now that she had an idea of where they were coming from, she knew where to look and quickly cast her viewing waters to the previous Man of Iron's home. He may say it was not his doing, but she'd been dealing death much too long to ignore this coincidence. They were just in time to hear Jarvis and Captain America locking horns over something. Per Miss Potts' orders, taking into consideration that Zermatt had at last census a population of 5,751, I've taken the liberty of choosing Brig, Switzerland as the next target, as its population was 12,823. I believe, Mr. Rogers, that you now have 59 minutes before we have this discussion again. Jarvis, I don't understand. How could you have done this? I have found that the easiest way to bluff one's way out of a situation is not to be bluffing in the first place. I have taken the liberty of making the first 2 strikes appear to have been launched by HYDRA or its affiliates. Force the launch of a 3rd strike and not only will the population be doubled again, but the world will believe that S.H.I.E.L.D. launched it. Simmons, get over here and take the sample. Jarvis, stop the strikes. You've made your point. My apologies for such drastic measures, Captain. I felt it highly unfair that I was not called upon to cast a vote in the fate of my father. For what it is worth, my vote would have been yes, no tiebreaker needed, and all this unpleasantness could have been avoided. Your father, Anthony Edward Stark, had 4 sons. Dummy, myself, Butterfingers, and you. We would have brought the vote to 12-8 in favor of resurrection. Now, Doctors Banner and Simmons, if you would join me in Lab State Route 34 on floor 97, we have work to do. Holy shit, was all Tony Stark could think to say. A million thoughts were running through his mind. Who the hell was Simmons? What the fuck were they trying to do? And then he just laughed, the too loud laugh of someone near hysteria. What did we just see, Man of Iron? Queen Frigg gently prodded him. Fuck if I know. Honestly, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they're doing. But Jarvis is apparently striking at cities hard enough to decimate entire populations. That's why he gave the census counts. He's gotta be using nukes. I just don't know why he's doing it or what kind of sample they need from Rogers. Why these places of Zermatt and Brig? I can feel the souls of these places. They are rotten, evil, dark. Queen Hel was persistent. Those were both on the list of HYDRA bases I'd started compiling when S.H.I.E.L.D. collapsed. Jarvis was making a point, but he was only going after the bad guys. And what happens if the Sir Jarvis does not get his way? Queen Frigg asked. Then he's just like his daddy. He makes an even bigger point, Tony responded. That is enough. We must bring this matter before Asgard, before it becomes too late to be manageable. Hel growled out, grabbing Tony by the collar of his shift. Niflheim could not stand another hit like the last. Her castle would crumble. Anthony Edward Stark was forced to hide a smile at the thought of anyone trying to manage Jarvis. Previously in Chapter 12, the Queen's way in. That is enough. We must bring this matter before Asgard, before it becomes too late to be manageable. Hel growled out, grabbing Tony by the collar of his shift. Niflheim could not stand another hit like the last. Her castle would crumble. Anthony Edward Stark was forced to hide a smile at the thought of anyone trying to manage Jarvis. Time passes differently when you're dead, apparently. Tony realized this almost immediately. There didn't seem to be any kind of flow of time in the realm of Niflheim. He, however, was mostly forgotten as the half-dead Queen Hel began to shout to the ceiling for Heimdall, Thor's buddy, right? To open the Bifrost to Asgard, there was a most pressing matter that must needs attending to. All the 9 realms were imperiled. See, Tony knew what the Bifrost was. He'd seen the burnt ring of earth that Thor's arrival via Bifrost had left on several occasions, and he knew what exactly wasn't happening. There weren't any bright blinding flashes of light, no scorching of the ground beneath their feet, and most importantly, no answers from the Asgardian gatekeeper. After a few more requests, and then demands, and then threats, Queen Hel looked to Queen Frigg with an apologetic look and simply said, "We do this the hard way then, stupid boys." Queen Frigg quirked a lovely golden eyebrow in response. Queen Hel glared at the wayward man of iron, snapped her fingers, and everything went dark for the former merchant of death. The two queens knew not why Heimdall would refuse Hel's safe passage into Asgard under such dire circumstances, but they were both concerned with the same possibility. It was not only Niflheim feeling the impact of what had happened, Asgard, the beautiful golden realm sitting atop of Yggdrasil, most likely shook with it as well. And now everyone was scrambling to save themselves. The question was, did they know the severity of the situation and that the solution to the problem lay on Midgard? And where was Thor at now? It did not matter. They needed to get to Asgard, and there was currently only one way of doing so if Heimdall was refusing entry or not manning the observatory. Sleipnir loved both his sister and grandmother greatly. He would abide the Lady Frigg's ghostly form. He would not, however, handle a mortal's soul so well, especially one responsible for delivering his father, Loki, such a crushing defeat in battle. It was much better for Hel to trap the Man of Irons into a soul sphere for the journey. Elsewise Sleipnir was liable to try to eat the former Merchant of Death should he attempt to ride. Anthony Edward Stark would know nothing but oblivion while in the soul sphere. The powerful gems were one of the only ways to preserve a soul millennium with no repercussions. Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse offspring of Loki, arrived with little fanfare and immediately knelt to allow the two queens to mount. Once they were sitting comfortably, he was off like a flash to the Asgardian observatory without any direction whatsoever. This made both of the queens very nervous. Sleipnir was smart, but he should not have known immediately where to take them, unless the situation was far worse than what they thought. And indeed it was. Upon reaching the observatory, they found it empty. Heimdall was nowhere in sight. They dismounted the horse, the brother and grandson respectively, and quickly made their ways to the Golden Palace. There was something very, very wrong. When the deal was brokered to resurrect Loki, it was fashioned in such a way that Loki and Odin would never be in the throne room, hopefully Asgard, together at one time. Loki would take the throne when Odin felt weak and needed the Odin sleep, happening more and more since Queen Frigg had died in the battle against the Dark Elves. And Odin would take it the rest. Since Frigg's death, Loki, in disguise as Odin, had held the throne more so than Odin. But Asgard was flourishing. Odin was free to mourn not only the loss of his wife, but both of his sons. One to his own carelessness, the other to the realm of Midgard. The only one who could possibly know of the deal, other than the two queens of course, was the Asgardian gatekeeper, Heimdall. Imagine Queen Hel's and Queen Frigg's surprise when they swept into the throne room unannounced to find Heimdall staring out over the stars watching a far distant event unfold. Odin's left hand on his left shoulder and Loki's sans disguise right to his right. Hel and Frigg exchanged a glance. The men were most likely watching the events unfold on Midgard, and the former Queen Frigg cleared her throat to break the trance. Both of the Asgardian kings whirled around for the intruder and upon seeing the two queens took guilty countenances. Like they were children caught with their hands in the pre-verbal cookie jar. Queen Frigg's arched eyebrow demanding an explanation had that effect on her two sons. Her husband was no different. And how Odin had lit with a fine golden glow upon realizing that his wife was back in the realm eternal. He took a step towards her, as if to take her into her arms, when Queen Hel stopped him. It would be cruel for them to touch, not touch, as the Lady Frigg was only a soul form and could not touch nor be touched. Odin would pass right through her. He knew this but forgot himself in his gladness to see her. Allfather, we come with pressing needs. The end of days begins on Midgard even as we speak. We must needs to stop it, Queen Hel tells the old king gently. Aye, we have been watching. The realm eternal shook with the son of Stark's demands. Release his soul back to Midgard and all will be well. By the darkness, Odin, Loki cursed out, now, we cater to the needs of a sentient computer created by a mortal. The last word said in the disgust. He still hadn't forgiven the Man of Iron for the defeat his Avengers had handed to him during his failed Chitauri invasion. True, he'd been under a mind compulsion himself, but still, mortal had bested him. It was intolerable. Father, this is no mere mortal, Queen Hel broke in, this is the Man of Iron, the former Merchant of Death. Somehow, he found his way into Niflheim instead of Valhalla when he died. There is more afoot here than we know. Ragnarok. A deep and steady timbre cut through what was surely to be another epic argument between the three generations of royalty. All eyes cut to the dark-skinned man who had spoken. The two queens and the two kings had forgotten that Heimdall was even in the throne room. Once, long ago, it was prophesied that the death of Loki would begin the events leading to Ragnarok. Consider this, my kings and queens. Loki has died and been revived. Ragnarok is coming. Heimdall, Queen Frigg paused, not sure how to proceed with her statement. Rarely was she at a loss for words. She had ruled by Odin's side for millennia. Keeping that man out of trouble had been a full-time job. The Man of Iron was injured long before Loki died. The events happening on Midgard now predated Loki's death. So how can that prophecy hold true? She finally asked. Queen Hel was the one who answered, because when Loki fell, he was thought dead and therefore was dead to all of Asgard and the 9 realms until the failed invasion into Midgard. Something that affected the Man of Iron deeply. The convergence was not Loki's first death, was it Heimdall? Indeed, it was not, my lady queen. Ragnarok, once started, cannot be stopped. It is said so in the prophecy, Odin mused. And then flinched at the sharp glare he received from his late wife. This does not mean that we will not, however, try. Hel, granddaughter, I order you to release the soul of the Man of Iron. Anthony Edward Stark, back into Midgard. Perhaps that will quell the beast he has built. My king, it is too late for that. Heimdall was once again lost across the stars. A final attempt to use multiple potions to reanimate the body has gone horribly wrong. Turn the soul to. Even the ashes were destroyed. The computer has given the realm exactly 1 hour to live. Loki spoke up for the first time since learning that his greatest enemy had been sent to Niflheim instead of Valhalla, where even Loki knew he deserved to go. Heimdall, what exactly does what mean? And why Niflheim? There are greater forces at work that we must needs to understand and stop. Ragnarok begins in 1 hour. With Midgard's position on the Yggdrasil, when it shatters, the world tree will topple and all 9 realms will fall. The Man of Iron did not fall in battle, no die a worthy death, he simply stopped. The Avengers, they defeated myself and the Chitauri army, surely they can stop Stark's Rouge AI, Loki responded. They will fail. I have seen this. This AI called Jarvis blames them for his creator's death. Asgard will be the last to fall, but fall it will. Heimdall was resigning himself to the inevitable. Thor is there, isn't he? Queen Frigg asked the room at large. At Odin's self-depreciating smile and nod she continued. He's grown so much since you first banished him. I remember though what his first response would have been all those years ago. My lovely lady wife, do you really think sending an army of Aesirdas to Midgard during a time like this would help? No, but at least Thor would not die alone from his people, was her saddened response. Father. Loki. You practiced the darkest of the arts while honing your magics, yes? Hel interrupted. What does it matter? I cannot magic Stark's creation away. I tried that during the invasion and nearly drained myself dead in the process. Stark's creation, could you create a new body for Stark? One that I could place his soul in and send him back? Surely the Jarvis will not kill his newly returned creator. Surely, Queen Hel was nearly giddy with the implication that they could stop this ending of the realms after all. I can't, Hel. Daughter mine. I would need him here, now. I would need access to unimaginable power, and I would need a soul sphere. The only way to bring him back now would be to make him truly immortal. And with the sudden banishment to Niflheim instead of Valhalla, how could he be trusted with that power? Anthony Edward Stark was always destined for Valhalla, but would never have made it through the gates, Heimdall interrupted. At everyone's quizzical expressions he elaborated, he would never have accepted the honor. He refused himself entry into Valhalla, thinking himself too dirty and impure. The Valkyries weep for the loss of him. Hel, Loki's daughter, Queen of Niflheim, squared her shoulders and withdrew the blue soul sphere from beneath her cloaks. Activating the release, she threw it at her father, where it spit the Man of Iron out, incorporeal form and all. Neither man had been expecting such a move, especially since Tony Stark landed flat on his back with Loki's feet and legs through his abdomen. Well, then, sup reindeer games, was just about all he could muster. How had he gone from the dark, foreboding castle of the Queen of the Dead to the golden, glittering castle of Asgard? And just who the fuck were the new guys? Other than Loki, of course. Tony would recognize that little shit anywhere. My apologies for the interruption. What Heimdall meant to say was quit gawking like idiots. You're royalty. The timer on Midgard is at midway. We haven't much time if we are to revive the Man of Iron and send him home. Wait, what? Home? You're sending me back to Earth? What the fuck is going on? Queen Frigg took his ghostly soul hand and helped us to his feet, and out of Loki's. We must send you home to stop your son from destroying your world and with it all the 9 realms. I'm sure this is hard and a shock for you, but it must needs doing. She was as gently as she could possibly be. She'd raised 2 sons after all. She knew boys had feelings as well. What the hell could dumb E have gotten into that's threatening the safety of the world? Tony demanded. Loki snorted. The clawed robot had doused him in fire extinguisher foam when Loki had tried to magic away the AI. "'Tis not dumb E, you other son, Stark." Stark pinched the bridge of his nose and let out a slow breath. He really should get an award for his acting skills here. Butterfingers or you? Was his next question. Oh, but it is so much worse than that, Stark. Your son Jarvis has armed every nuclear warhead on the face of the realm and there is less than 30 minutes left in his countdown. Oh, Loki was so smug. So smug. So Tony Stark did the only thing he could think to do. Well then, in that case, I ain't going back. Previously in chapter 13, the Kings weigh in. Oh, but it is so much worse than that, Stark. Your son Jarvis has armed every nuclear warhead on the face of the realm and there is less than 30 minutes left in his countdown. Oh, Loki was so smug. So smug. So Tony Stark did the only thing he could think to do. Well then, in that case, I ain't going back. High atop the world tree, Yggdrasil, in the golden realm of Asgard, its castle's throne room held 2 living Aesir. 1 revived Jotun, his half-living, half-dead daughter, and 2 souls more or less recently dead. 6 souls in total, and yet complete pandemonium broke when the Man of Iron, Anthony Edward Stark, announced that he would not be returning to Midgard to stop his wayward AI from destroying the planet, and in turn all the 9 realms. He'd lived a mere 43 years compared to the millennia those around him had had. Still he'd lived. He'd died. He was done being pushed around by cosmic forces that he couldn't hope to understand. Fuck 'em all. Odin bellowed and growled his threats, while Frigg tried gentle persuasion with promises of boons and gifts. She was dead. How was she going to follow through? Heimdall's gaze fell out over the stars once more while Loki and Hel locked themselves in a heated conversation. Loki was of the same mind as Odin. Force the idiotic soul into a new body and shunt him back to Midgard. The AI will see him and stop. Hel was not so sure that plan would work. Anthony Edward Stark was the most clever of souls she'd ever come across. He had a plan in place, and any force was likely to backfire. Tony had to bite his lip to keep from laughing. It was all going spectacularly to plan. Man of Iron, why will you not return to your home and save it? Save us all? Queen Frigg finally asked him outright. It's like I told Pepper. I'm tired. Tired of always being the battering ram against the bad guys that are always coming. Tired of always trying and never being good enough. I'm tired of putting the people I love more than anything else in this universe in danger because I'm not fast enough, strong enough, or smart enough to keep them safe, he finally finished. And he'd said more than he ever meant to. And you think the answer to that is to let them all burn, then? Is that it? Loki asked him, looking damn near horrified. What's to stop me from forcing you into a body and back to Midgard? Surely your son will see you alive and stop the countdown. And then what, Stark? He yelled back. Such a waste of life. But at the same time Loki could understand it. A long and lingering painful death, or a quick, over in a flash. Never knew what hit you, death. How many times had he prayed for death while at the mercy of the Chitauri? Was this Stark's endgame? And what's to stop me from manually overriding Jarvis and detonating all those nukes he's got primed and ready? Huh? You send me back. Sure, you'll stop the countdown, but that's no guarantee that the world will be safe. Who the fuck do you think taught him how to negotiate? Stark hissed right back at Loki. At the word, negotiate, King Odin's head snapped around. As did Queen Hel's and Queen Frigg's. Perfect. He'd gotten their attention. Now it was time for the sell. And since he spent a good 15 plus years selling weapons of mass destruction, he had a good pitch for getting exactly what and how he wanted something. He'd never planned for it make it this far, of course. He'd always known he'd die young. In was in the nature of his business. And he wasn't angling for his resurrection here either. But there was something that needed to happen more than anything else in the universe. And if they wanted to bring him back from the dead, well, that was going to have to happen first. He'd known he was cutting his life expectancy exponentially shorter when he had the arc reactor removed and had coded JARVIS to take the appropriate measures to ensure the survival of Stark Industries and the Avengers. Something must have happened Earthside to push him into taking down HYDRA himself, other than Tony dying, of course. The only way to find out was to get back down there and find out what the fuck was going on, he supposed. Odin spoke first, finally in a level voice without bellows and growls. Negotiate. You want to negotiate for a chance to return to the land of the living to be with your loved ones. So maybe he was growling a little bit. You make a fair point that we cannot force you. What is it that you wish for in return for your cooperation? Definitely growling again at this point. Actually, it isn't something that you can provide. You just need to not be in the way. Tony trailed off as Odin's tightened further on his staff and the alien metal creaked. You think me incapable of granting your request? Foolish mortal. Odin roared and Tony winced, rubbing his ears. See, Tony knew Odin couldn't grant his request, or he would have done it by now. Funny how you assume it is only one request. Tony trailed off as Odin's anger got the better of him and he swiped at him with his staff. That went right through Tony because Tony was an incorporeal soul. Without any solid body. At least not yet. Odin, for shame, Queen Frigg called. Leave the boy alone until we know what he wants. Tony threw her a smirk. Behead him after he saves the 9 realms, yes? Tony's smirk faded, but this was all part of the show, and the good Queen Frigg didn't even know it. Odin, mollified after being called down by his late wife, looked the man of iron in the eyes. He saw intelligence that would rival that of his own son, Loki. In desperation. He knew then, without a doubt, the man of iron would do as he said if forced. He, himself would destroy Midgard, if they failed to properly negotiate with him. But in order to send him back, they were already giving him so much power. Could he possibly be trusted with even more? If he were to ask for the Tesseract, Odin knew then, that all hope would be lost. I do not think you understand what is needed to bring you back from the dead back, boy. State your demands. Let us negotiate, Odin finally said. The Avengers have failed. The countdown has zeroed. Midgard's destruction is imminent. Heimdall suddenly interrupted. Tony nearly lost his composure. Perfectly timing as usual JARVIS. That is unfortunate. My demands are simple. 1. Leave Thor alone. Loki let him leave Asgard to live on Earth, Midgard, for as long as you were in the Odin sleep and he could be with Jane. Let him be with Jane. Lady Frigg's eyes filled with tears and Odin's widened when they realized that this man, this mortal soul, who could be asking for anything in the universe, was asking for instead his friend's happiness. Their son's happiness. 2. A life for a life. Or a death for a life. I don't really know how to put this. Tony trailed off as the first bombs on Midgard were triggered and the first shockwaves hit Asgard. Speak faster, Merchant of Death, or there will be nothing left to save, Queen Hel hissed. She could feel her castle starting to succumb to the great evils pouring into Niflheim. I don't want to go back to life, I want to stay dead, and that's not fair to me. Damn it. I want someone else resurrected too. That's Hel's job, but Odin, you can't stand in the way. That's all I want. Leave Thor alone and let someone else come back too. Done, Hel agreed. Even if she had to drag a soul out of Valhalla for this man, she would do it to save the 9 realms. Done, Odin was slower to reply. Surely this was too easy. Hurry, Heimdall cut in. Loki bent down and picked up the soul sphere that the man of iron had been transported to Asgard in and turned to him. Odin placed his hands over Loki's shoulders to provide the power boost that Loki would need to perform the spell, and Loki beckoned the soul closer to him. There is no way that I can make this not hurt. If it is consolation, you are about to become immortal. Never again Iltronger that your captain, the beast, and even Thor. It is an amazing power to be granted, but then, someone must keep that son of yours in check. Wait, Hel hurried over and whispered in the soul's ear. She needed the name of her requested resurrected before they continued. When the process was done, he would be sent straight back to Midgard to prevent any further damage. And when the name was duly whispered into her flesh ear, a tear escaped out of both sides of her face. Both the living and dead for the first time in over a millennium. Anthony Edward Stark made no sound as Loki slammed the soul sphere into his chest, right where the arc reactor used to sit, and channeled both his and Odin's powers into it. He made no sound as electricity seemed to race through every nerve ending in his body as magic rebuilt it. He made no sound as he felt the strength and powers pour through every fiber of his being. He did, however, gasp aloud when he was suddenly falling. They were sending him back to Earth. They were sending him home. And for the first time in over a decade his heart was pounding with joy and not exertion, fear, or pain. Previously in Chapter 14, brokering a deal. He did, however, gasp aloud when he was suddenly falling. They were sending him back to Earth. They were sending him home. And for the first time in over a decade his heart was pounding with joy and not exertion, fear, or pain. Tony Stark did not land gracefully on the floor of his workshop. He landed flat on his belly, spread eagle, nose crunched into the hard concrete flooring. If not for all the new powers and magics that had just been shoved into him by Loki and Odin, that nose would be very broken. It wasn't, but that didn't mean it didn't hurt like a motherfucker. Tony finally figured out which brain synapses he needed to fire to lift his head, and proceeded to flop over on his back and give the ceiling the stink eye. How the fuck was he lying in a crater if there was no hole in the ceiling? And Jesus fuck, how many Iron Man suits were there in here, currently standing over him? UHG was his very first very eloquent post-death speech. He was very proud of himself. Jarvis, however, remembered the days that his creator would get blackout drunk or high or concussed or all of the above. UHG was highly recognizable to Jarvis. He stopped detonating the warheads and had Mach 259 lean in for a better visual. Dumb E, U, and Butterfingers had to be held back by a line of suits. They too recognized the UHG visual showed that the thing that had suddenly crashed down in the workshop, hard enough to crater the floor, but did not come through the ceiling, matched that of the late Anthony Edward Stark. Audio matched as well. However, every other scan that Jarvis could run told him that this was not his creator. Body mass and density did not match that of a human, nor an Asgardian, or anything else Jarvis could compare it against. There was also the matter of the energy source in its chest. Just like the arc reactor, but not. So he did the only thing he could do, exactly what his father would have done. Tony Stark grunted again when one of the suits poked him in the ribs. He tried to wave it off, but only succeed in smacking himself in his still sore nose. Damn it, Jarvis, go way. Not dead no more. Minute, he finally slurred out. His thought processes might be firing at 1,000,000 miles a minute. But this body was brand spanking new and he didn't have the fine motor control he needed over it yet. Jarvis felt hope swell throughout his entire global operating system. This was his creator. He let the bots through so that they could see for themselves that he'd well and truly returned. Unfortunately, he was just a fraction too late. Even with the Mach 259 standing right there, Dumb E let his joy be known by dousing his creator with his ever-trusty fire extinguisher. Those in the tower's communal living room were still taking comfort from one another when the clock struck 6:32 p.m. They could tell many of the warheads had detonated in the Swiss Alps, Germany, and Russia. The little damning gray dots replacing the angry red ones gave proof to that. What the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. team couldn't figure out though, was why Jarvis would detonate the warheads one by one instead of one big bang. After all, a blaze of glory was his creator's style. They were even more confused when the detonations stopped, the world map still chock full of those red dots but no more going gray. They'd been waiting on the end of the world. Apparently they were sitting on a nuclear warhead according to the map, and now, something had stopped it. Had Jarvis had a change of heart? Short-circuited? Had a higher power stepped in? Sergeant James Buchanan Barnes was the first person to speak up. Are we dead? It was a legitimate question considering they'd all been waiting for that nuclear goodbye and he and Stevie didn't even belong in this time period anyway. No, jerk, I think he stopped. I don't know why, But I think JARVIS stopped. Captain Stephen Grant Rogers was just about breathless in his reply. JARVIS had had a set course. What could have possibly have swayed him from it? Are you fucking telling me that Stark's AI just scared the holy piss out of us so he could systematically destroy HYDRA? The former Winter Soldier yelled in response. The room went deathly quiet and all eyes went to him. Every single red dot that is now a gray dot. Fucking HYDRA bases. He yelled. Everyone jumped when JARVIS cut in. Of course they were Sergeant Barnes. I may not be human, but I am not a monster. Should I needed to have continued, I would have moved on to known AIM headquarters and then on to any other past enemies of Sir. You could have heard a pin drop in the communal living room. When Sir became too ill to build, he hacked and amassed data. I used this data to plot out a coordinated strike against those that would wish my father would ill. JARVIS paused as if he were busy elsewhere. Imagine it as a working project insight. Only with no civilian causalities. HYDRA had in my best estimation already killed all resistance, or recruited them. Coulson finally spoke up. He could not believe that just as out of the blue the threat of HYDRA had come. It had gone. But the nuclear fallout from so many gray dots, he had to know if the planet would survive such an extreme measure. JARVIS, exactly how many nuclear warheads did you use? The room fell silent again as JARVIS didn't answer. In the penthouse suite JARVIS was busy trying to wake its 3 occupants. If anyone on Earth needed to know that Sir was back, it was Miss, Colonel Rhodes, and Happy. As he could see the Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. team still milling about the communal living room. Vital scans supported shock assessment. And Sir attempting to shower the foam away in the workshop. He felt he could do this. If sentient robot beings were capable of having heart attacks, JARVIS would have suffered one when his creator's feet slipped out from beneath him and he went crashing head first into sink of the workshop. The porcelain shattered. Sir got up like it was nothing. Vitals were unchanged. And resumed his shower, attempting to get foam out of his hair. Finally, Miss was awake. JARVIS. What's happened? Did it work? Why was I sleeping? Why are the boys sleeping? Virginia, Pepper, Potts spit the questions out rapid fire, growing increasing distressed as she did. The only reason she could think that she would be sleeping is if she were sedated, and the only reason she could think that she would have been sedated were if it didn't work. Oh God! What if it didn't work? Noting her distress, JARVIS did the one thing he was sure would snap her back to the present, and get rid of the fiery orange that was starting to sneak up under her skin. The view screen in front of her came alive with live video feed of Sir in the shower. Miss relaxed instantly knowing that he was alive and safe. Colonel Rhodes and Happy Hogan were also pleased, less so though than to wake up to that image. Through the video feed they could see Anthony Edward Stark, a picture of perfect health. He looked so much younger than his 43 years, but that could be a product of not dying. His body was fit and strong, and they had a perfect view. It was absolutely scarless. Even where the arc reactor used to sit, now a blue sphere sat slightly protruding from his chest. There were no scars. Pepper said the first thing that came to her mind. It was usually the first thing that came to her mind after one of his near-death, death-defying stunts, or generally scares the crap out of her. I'm going to kill him. Still high atop the world tree, Heloloch's daughter let out a small sigh as she looked around the grand throne room as Asgard for what could be the final time. Odin had cast her out millennia ago, and she'd not been welcomed back since. He thought himself as all-powerful, but he wasn't. Sure, she would not have been able of iron, because of the way his body had been completely destroyed and not ceremoniously sent to her, but she could resurrect the person he requested. Out of all the people in the 9 realms, the name that had slipped off his lips and into her ears could not have surprised her more. Hel knew they would be needed though, to keep this balance of power that had been struck, so she began gathering her energies. Flitters of light swirled in from the living side of her body while darkness swirled from the side of the dead. Odin and Loki's attention both snapped to her when they felt her gathering her, but with everything they just expanded to resurrect Anthony Edward Stark. They could not stop her from doing this. She also had the attention of Heimdall and the Lady Frigg, both of whom stepped closer to Hel. Heimdall to protect his kings. as was his duty to Asgard, and Frigg to play peacekeeper between the truly powerful people in the throne room. The living side of Hel's face quirked up in a devious smile. That could have come nowhere but her father, and Frigg gasped. She knew who the Man of Iron requested to be resurrected. Hel's powers of light and darkness, the perfect metaphor for the living and dead aspects of her own body, flared. And the Lady Frigg, suddenly very, very corporal again, spun around and very soundly bitch-slapped some sense into her husband, Odin. Previously in Chapter 15. Daddy's back. Anthony Edward Stark has been returned to Midgard much different than when he left it. His family members, Jarvis and the bots as well as Miss, Colonel Rhodes, and Happy, all know him to be returned. Jarvis has stopped his strike against the past enemies of his creator, much to confusion of S.H.I.E.L.D. and the Avengers, and we have found that Tony used his one resurrection to bring back the late Queen Frigg of Asgard. Anthony Edward Stark did nothing in half measures. Neither did his son, Jarvis. Something else could be said for his boys Dummy, You, and Butterfingers, but at least they tried, damn it. As the formerly dead, and now forever immortal, superhero completed his shower, he knew he'd have to face the proverbial firing squad. A communal living room full of Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D. personnel, and would you look at that? Agent really was alive, or an absolutely fuming Pepper Potts flanked by an irate Road and a not-so-happy in the penthouse suit. Choices. Not to mention the grenade he'd left. Pin out assholes. In Asgard. But there was really no way for him to get there right now, so he came to a decision. Assemble everybody in one place for the reunion. Pepper probably isn't the only one that is gonna try to kill me. He trailed off, picking out the best of his Armani suits, Gucci loafers, and Tiffany cufflinks. Tony Stark was dressing like he was going to war. Of course, sir. Miss is already on her way to the communal living room with Colonel Rhodes and Happy. I would suggest you hurry. Jarvis trailed off. That pissed, hun? That would be an understatement, sir. You died. You've got me there. Okay, Jay. Let's do this, was Tony's response as made his way to the elevator from his workshop. He knew that this was not going to be easy. How to explain that yes he died, now he never could again, and fuck? Was he supposed to tell Thor that Loki was alive? The trio from the penthouse suit stepped from the elevator into chaos, formerly known as the communal living room. For the people that held the fate of the world in their hands on a regular basis, it was rather frightening to see and hear those same people crying, laughing hysterically, or just staring off into space. These were the Earth's mightiest heroes? And their back-end support? It was a goddamn train wreck. And there was even a god of thunder in the damn room. No one noticed their arrival. Agent May stared off into space as she held Agents Skye and Simmons, both of whom were crying. Coulson and Hill were busy watching Rogers and Wilson trying to get a screaming Barnes back under control. Barton and Romanoff just laughed and laughed and laughed. Thor smiled with them. If you can't laugh at the maybe end of the world, when can you? The Hulk had finally shrunk down to Banner. And he was starting to stir. Good, just in time. Pepper could hear the elevator moving behind her. Colonel James Rhodes cleared his throat, effectively getting the attention of everyone in the room. Considering that attention included 2 super soldiers, 3, 4 master spy assassins depending on how you classed Coulson, a couple of extra agents, a god of thunder, and a really cranky scientist, he wasn't glad for it. But they had an announcement to make, and judging by the sounds of the elevator, he was almost here. Coulson spoke first, establishing himself as a go-between for the 2 groups. The ones Jarvis likes, and ones he doesn't. Colonel Rhodes, Miss Potts, Mr. Hogan, I'm not sure how much you are aware of the past few hours, but can you presently tell us what is going on? He finally settled on. He didn't know if they knew about the attacks Jarvis launched, but they might be the reason that the attacks were stopped. Virginia, Pepper, Potts answered, you failed in your promise to me, Coulson. I told you, should you fail, your world would burn. Jarvis. What has happened in the time that I was sedated until now? A shudder went round the room. Pepper's voice had never been so cold. Using the data compiled by Sir, I systematically destroyed the entirety of HYDRA, Miss. Sir originally planned to turn over his findings to former Director Fury so that appropriate steps could be taken. When Sir was turned down and his health declined, I was given full access to the manufacture sets. Pepper knew that Tony was in the elevator directly behind her now, listening to every word that was being said. And what does Tony giving you full access to the manufacture sets have anything to do with? Oh, that's how you were able to mass-produce the suits. Yes, miss, along with weapon BFS 259 AESNSLOD. JARVIS. I don't understand. Tony stopped making weapons. What the hell is that? Sir did stop making weapons, but he never stopped designing them. The designation is the 259th weapon on the Black Filesever, designed by Anthony Edward Stark, that must never see light of day. Then why did you make it, mass produce it? JARVIS. What have you done? The weapon is an untraceable, smart, tactical warhead that can be programmed to attack a certain feature such as creed, race, or as was used in this case, emblem. Anywhere in the world the HYDRA emblem showed prevalence, the warhead was snuck in and detonated. What makes this weapon so dangerous is that it will only kill or destroy its intended target, leaving no civilian causalities or property damage. There is no way to trace it back to its origin point. Then why would Stark hide it on a ghost server? The Black Widow spoke up. She'd been inside his company. She'd never seen even the barest trace of such a server, let alone one caching designs of weapons of that magnitude. Because, Agent Romanoff, it would be just as easy to use the SHIELD or Avengers emblem for a strike basis, was JARVIS's answer. Why did you stop the strikes? Earlier you mentioned had you needed to continue, you would have went after so-and-so, so what changed? Barton finally spoke up, ignoring the glare Coulson was sending him. Imagine the surprise that ran rampant through the room when JARVIS took that moment to open the elevators. Dummy, you, and Butterfingers rolled out to greet Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy. That wasn't what shocked the room though, that honor belonged to the no longer dead Anthony Edward Stark, who came strutting out after them. Previously in Chapter 16, we've only just begun. Imagine the surprise that ran rampant through the room when JARVIS took that moment to open the elevators. Dummy, you, and Butterfingers rolled out to greet Pepper, Rhodey, and Happy. That wasn't what shocked the room though, that honor belonged to the no longer dead Anthony Edward Stark, who came strutting out after them. The communal living room of the Avengers Tower was dead silent. Except for the sound of the bots squeaking tires. Tony would really have to overhaul them soon. No one was making a sound, just staring at the newly resurrected Anthony Edward Stark. It was like the room had frozen. Everyone that hadn't been in the penthouse suit for JARVIS's reveal were suddenly questioning whether or not they had survived the end of the world after all. Tony, being Tony of course, couldn't stand the awkward silence. He proceeded to throw his hands up in the air and yelled, "Don't shoot! I don't want to die again so soon." This seemed to break the spell that had fallen over the room. Then again, that could have been Pepper Potts marching forward to bitch slap the holy fuck out of him for what he put her through. A sickening crunch was heard as Tony's head rocked to the side. Pepper flushed a brilliant fiery orange and gasped in pain. Before anyone else could react, Tony's hands shot out to cradle Pepper's broken wrist. The blue orb under his shirt brightened to the point where the whole room could see it. His hands lit with a gentle blue glow as well, and without a word, Anthony Edward Stark completely healed Pepper Potts' broken wrist. By Odin's eye, the Man of Iron returns a god. Thor was the first person to actually speak, and the tower shook with the force of his rumble. He'd not seen the man without the arc reactor, and did not immediately recognize the soul sphere. Everyone could see the difference in the condition of his body. He wasn't big and bulky like Thor, but he shone like the Acer. Technically, that's not true, Tony started. But they didn't tell me about the healing thing. Can you do the healing thing, Thor? Nay, Man of Iron, that is a most rare ability, even on Asgard. Please, if you would. An explanation would not be amiss. The prince trailed off. Tony looked around the room. The people he knew and the people he didn't, to the people he loved as family and the people that were getting there, and wondered just what he was supposed to tell them. It was suddenly obvious to him that he didn't have all the information concerning the whole coming back from the dead thing. He hated not having all the information. He was still cradling Pepper's wrist in his hands. He looked in her eyes and gently tugged her into his arms. He kissed her lips, then her forehead, and then wrapped her into an embrace. The truth is, I don't know the whole explanation. I don't even know what I can tell you of what I do know. All I know for a fact is that I love you. Virginia Potts. Rhodey? You've always been a brother to me. Happy? A best friend. Avengers? I did my best to create a home and safe place for you all. He trailed off as Natasha Romanoff stepped forward. The Black Widow was cautious in her approach. This man was back from the dead and fundamentally different from his past life, but she felt she owed it to him to apologize. Her partner in crime, Clint, Hawkeye, Barton, stood proudly beside her. We failed you, Tony, she said quietly, in reverence to the woman he held swaying in his arms. The look on his face, though, Widow knew she was in for a fight, so she hurried on to get her point across. We spoke on it after you passed. We each thought we were doing what was best either for S.H.I.E.L.D., she glances at Rogers, or for you, yourself. Her eyes flit to Barton and Rhodes. Tony's face softened at the implication that it wasn't just his family looking out for him, but the Avengers too. None of us knew you were so dangerous ill because you hid it so well, and maybe we thought we'd have the time. She trailed off herself, not sure of how to finish and whether or not she could speak for the rest of the group. She didn't have to. Where she stopped, Captain Rogers picked up. Stark, I think what we're trying to get across here is that what has happened is done. We can't change it even for the world. What we can do, if you'll allow it, is spend the rest of however long we each have making it up to you. It doesn't matter if you came back different or the same. So long as you're happy and healthy, well, that's good enough for me. Us. That's good enough for us, Director Coulson cut in. Bruce nodded his agreement. Tony Stark's first act back from the dead might have been to crack a joke, but the second had been to heal an injured Pepper Potts. They might not know just how much Tony had been altered in his trip to the other side, but that didn't matter to them because he was back, and he was still Tony. Previously Chapter 17. We do what we want. Tony Stark's first act back from the dead might have been to crack a joke, but the second had been to heal an injured Pepper Potts. They might not know just how much Tony had been altered in his trip to the other side, but that didn't matter to them because he was back, and he was still Tony. Life went on as normally as it could in the tower once Anthony Edward Stark was revived from the dead. With the public and everyone on the outside never knowing that he'd died, Tony was left on how to explain his sudden good health. Additionally, the world was looking to the residents of Avengers Tower to explain the massive die-off in the areas of the world Jarvis took out Hydran. It was agreed on that they couldn't very well tell the public the truth. It would cause pandemonium and panic. Less than 3 days after announcing to the Avengers and Coulson's S.H.I.E.L.D. team that he was alive, Tony Stark found himself in the middle of a heated discussion trying to figure out just where everyone stood. No one was really pushing him to explain. They knew that if Tony didn't understand it, they definitely wouldn't, but he felt burdened with the knowledge that one of their fiercest enemies, Loki, wasn't as dead as they'd all been informed. He felt heavy with guilt that he hadn't told Thor the truth especially, but he tried to write that off as not knowing whether or not Frigg had been brought back. He was very grateful for those 3 days. After he'd been pulled away from, celebrating, damn his stamina was now, whoa, with Pepper. He had been, however, hit with the hard questions. Was he going to punish Jarvis? Would he continue as Iron Man? Would he consider joining the Avengers? Officially? What were they going to tell the world? And the list went on, and on, and on. Rhodey was the first to notice the hunching of his shoulders. Hey Tones, how you holding up? Rhodey's soft question nearly shocked Tony out of his skin. Apparently on top of all the new powers and whatnot, he now had super hearing. Super everything really. Rhodey should not have been able to surprise him. He answered once he'd finally recovered from jumping, you know, now is the time I'd make a crack about having a heart condition. But I guess I never have to worry about that again. Rhodey looked pained so he plowed on. I mean, I'm good. Really good, I've never felt this good in my life, ya know? So, what's the problem? Rhodey was nothing if not persistent. I don't know, platypus. I just have this feeling like it's not over. Tony was forced to trail off as the light of the Bifrost lit up the tower's landing pad. At least, he assumed it was the Bifrost with the blinding light, tinkling bell sounds, and, oh, the 2 people now standing on his balcony. Well, fuck. The secret was out of the bag now. Loki the god of mischief and Queen Frigg of Asgard stood stoically together, and Tony Stark just knew it was about to get a whole lot more complicated.